Jess, will you give us a countdown?
All right, I think we're good. 3, 2, 1, go.
Right. Good evening and welcome to the regular board meeting of the Bellevue School District for Thursday, December 1st, 2022. The time is 4:32 and we'll start with roll call.
Jane Aris.
Christine Chu.
Seema Sarafan.
Joyce Shuey. Can you hear me?
Oops, Mike. Carolyn Watson.
Eva Collins here for Dr. Jarvis.
Thank you. At this time, I will ask our executive director, John Harrison, to introduce our student.
Thank you, President Serafan. Tonight, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Miss Diane Sun. Diane is a senior at Interlake High School. A couple of claims to fame, and they're big ones. She is one of 5 national student poets, and she also is on the national high school debate team. So clearly she has a way with words. And when I spoke to her a week or so ago, I really kind of encouraged her poetry, because poetry speaks to our hearts and our souls, and words can change everything. So I present to you Diane, and thank you for being here, Diane. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Diane, we generally start with our Pledge of Allegiance and land acknowledgement. Would you like to lead us in those? Would you prefer that? Okay, all right, so we will follow you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Duwamish and Snoqualmie tribes. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. We reflect on the historic context that brings us to reside on this land and accept responsibility to interrupt erasure. We commit to an ongoing partnership with Snoqualmie tribe as we listen to, learn from, and lead with their guidance.
Thank you. So Diane, this is now your time. So we are ready for whatever you'd like to do. As Executive Director Harrison mentioned, we relayed an indirect plug to love to hear any of your poetry, but wherever you want to go.
Cool. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'll start off just by sharing a little bit about my year of service as a national student poet. And so I'm doing a community service project throughout this year, and I'm specifically focusing on the criminal justice system and leading workshops in prisons, especially for juvenile detention centers. So hopefully I can work in the local Bellevue area and King County as well on that. With that being said, I'll share one of my poems, and this is the poem that I actually had the opportunity to read at the White House for First Lady Jill Biden, and it's called A Recipe for Steaming Almost Dragon. And this comes with 2 definitions: Longmen, which means the Dragon Gate, and in Chinese mythology, carps who leap over a waterfall through the Dragon Gate become dragons, and Qingzhonglong, which means steamed dragon. A recipe for steaming almost dragon. Every few centuries, when the carp gathered at the base of the Longmen in thunder clouds, riled with legend and youth, we waded into the brinks of the waterfall and waited. That night, we would feast upon Qingzhonglong. First, check for freshness. Its scale should be taut, a bowstring still drawn long after the arrow has departed. Its eyes should be clear, a divine glimmer of a future once promised. Its gills should be stark red, the intrusion of fate into viscera. Second, dress it to your liking. With a blade, furrow its body in angles, such that its exterior still lays neatly. Only you should be aware of the aromatics buried in its torso, of the ginger rooted in its nervous system, of the scallions that replaced arteries. Third, steam for 7 minutes. In death, we replicate glory with an opiate haze. Here we unwind the dreams tucked in little carp skulls, the lacy hemlines of cascades, the rumble of cast iron gates opening, the pale heat of the heavens. This is flesh cleaved from the mountainside, skin sheened in gold, and bones that prickle at the roof of the sky, still tasting faintly of thunder. Yeah, so that was my poem.
That was beautiful. Thank you. You are hearing and seeing our applause collectively. We thank you. I want to just let you say, if you have anything else you want to say, I just want to make sure you have a chance. I heard Executive Director Harrison talk about your work as a debate team member. If there's anything you want to say about that, we'd love to hear it, but mainly we just want to thank you. So I leave that to you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity on debate. I mean, it's an incredible honor to be able to represent my school, the Interlake debate team, as well as, Bellevue School District, Washington as a whole on the national team. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Yeah. Thank
you. So you are welcome, Diane, to stay for the rest of our meeting, or if you need to drop, we will not be offended. So I just want to let you know that. So thank you again for taking the time. It was really a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Bye. Okay, so at this time, we go to our acknowledgements. We want to acknowledge that tomorrow is National Special Education Day. We thank all of our educators, especially those who have the special gift and talent for special education. So thank you. December 6th through the 12th is Computer Science Education Week. So that is our acknowledgements. We now go to the approval of our agenda. I ask for a second to my motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please say aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think I have 5 ayes. So our agenda is approved. At this time, we go to our consent agenda, and I ask for a second to my motion to approve tonight's agenda. Excuse me, to approve tonight's consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
I have
Yes,
one
Director.
question that I did not ask ahead of time. I just wanted to know if the ASB Constitution memo, if that was, if there was anything there that came from students, or if that's just a housekeeping piece, or yeah, I just wanted to know who was putting that forward.
I believe
I wonder-
Vice President Watson can.
Yeah, if that was me, because I mentioned at one of our previous school board meetings that I had in previous years a concern about ASB constitutions, and that maybe we should go through them and make sure that, kind of apply the critical criteria kind of thing. So what we have here is just a modification to one of the constitutions. It doesn't seem to have anything in it that jumped out to me as being problematic, but I will propose that maybe we could look at them all sometime, but apparently all the other ones had been approved last year and didn't require anything from us.
So it says that it's being submitted for board approval, but all I see is a memo and I don't see the actual constitution. So are we approving a memo, or are we approving a constitution? Is this submitted by the ODL students?
John's trying to try to tell us
I
something.
think Executive Director Harrison has his hand up. So go ahead.
Yeah, the changes, I think Director Chu just acknowledged them. The changes did come from the students. The memo explains the changes, and they're relatively minor modifications. But you're right, I don't see the actual constitution there. So what comes before you, if there's any change to the constitutions, that comes to you for your approval?
I think we should pull this from the agenda because there's no constitution in here to approve. We can't approve a memo. We're approving a constitution and it's not here, right? Unless I'm missing something. Sorry, I don't mean to
I-
be
No,
stickler
I
about
think
this, but
I
there's
think
no
it's a fair-
constitution.
Yeah, I think it is a fair ask. So I do see a hand up and I just want to find out whose that is, but
Hi,
but
that's
otherwise,
Hannah.
okay.
So I have to apologize. The Constitution is attached, but it's not attached in the correct section on board docs. It's attached, you have to be logged in to see it. So that is my mistake, and I can move it to the next meeting and make sure that that attachment is in the correct place.
I think
John,
that
is
makes
that
sense.
okay? Just to make sure, is that okay for the kids? Is there anything that hampers them from doing if the Constitution hasn't been approved?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to pull that out of the consent agenda, but otherwise that would be pulling item 2.9 from the consent agenda. But otherwise, unless there's discussion, I'll take a vote on my motion seconded to approve tonight's consent agenda. All those in favor?
Sans 2.9.
Yeah, pulling out 2.9. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Okay. All right, the motion carries, and as to 2.9, we carry that forward to the consent agenda for December 15th. Okay, I believe that takes us to, if we can advance the slide, I think we have our superintendent update, and for the community to know, due to some family challenges, Superintendent Art Jarvis was not able to attend tonight, and so our Deputy Superintendent Eva Collins is standing in for him. So thank you.
Thank you, President Serafan. You are in possession of a computer science report, but due to today as a non-work day, as a snow day, and school was canceled, our developers are not here to give the report. But if you have any questions about the report, you can certainly send them to me, and I'm happy to get those answered. I know you've already looked at this and had an opportunity to ask questions, I believe, on Monday, but if you have additional questions after looking at the report, I do want to take this opportunity to express how proud I am of our computer science leadership and all of our educators who are just continually learning and applying new content and approaches for students in this area of computer science. It's certainly a point of pride for our district. So if there's ever an opportunity for us to talk more about this and have our developers come and showcase, that would be amazing. I hope you enjoyed reading the report and looking at the presentation. I do also want to make a couple other announcements and celebrations. The first one is about the snow. We did cancel school today, and as you know, we called it last night, and there's always a risk when you make these calls early, but we really wanted to prioritize student and staff safety when making these decisions. So we played out every scenario based on the forecast that we were following, and it made sense at the time to call school, and we think we made the right decision. So we've received a lot of positive feedback about making the call early. People really appreciated that in terms of their planning and preparation. And it's rare that we can make an early call, but we felt we could based on the conditions, not only within Bellevue, but in the surrounding areas where our employees work or live. And on the topic of weather, I wanted to give a shout out to our Director of Transportation, Dawn Dixon, and the entire transportation department. Dawn, I'm not sure if you know, but he assesses the road conditions in the wee hours of the morning to help us determine if our students and staff can safely travel to school. And so yesterday when we did have school, there was a challenge on Somerset Hill because the snow had just started falling just before dismissal, and there was a blockage of cars and Metro bus, and 4 of our 5 buses had to return to the school. But the staff stepped up to take care of the kids, and Dawn Dixon kept us well informed, and parents felt this sense of assurance that the school and district were taking care of their kids. And then the Bellevue School District, or Bellevue Police Department jumped into action. And we just want to thank the Somerset kids, the staff, and the entire community, especially our bus drivers and transportation leadership in that situation, but really, like daily for how they get our kids to and from school safely. And then finally, I just wanted to share that last night, I think some of you may have been there as well. I attended an event put on by PTSA. It was intended to be hosted at Sammamish in person, and they had a huge event planned. And unfortunately, due to the snow, it was moved remote. This event was hosted in collaboration with Sammamish, Bellevue PTSA Council, the Washington State PTSA, National PTA, and TikTok. And the intent of the event was really to talk about student well-being and safety, basically online. And so they had a keynote speaker from TikTok, and more than 100 people were in attendance. And our kids got to take the virtual stage essentially and talk about their experiences with social media, and including the benefits and the harm. And, it was a really good conversation, and I think can be the beginning of having these opportunities to enlighten our kids and do a better job of how we educate our kids about the benefits and harm of social media and how they can better navigate that. And we've taken some proactive steps through health and ELA and our SEL curriculum, for example, but it's an area that we want to improve. And one of the students made a comment that I think really makes sense here, which is that he said, because we were talking about like, listen to your parents and what they say. And he said, we grew up with social media, like we were born with social media. So we've been using this stuff probably more intently than our parents have. And so we do know some things. So talk to us about it, is the message I heard from the student. And I think for us, in terms of determining how we would move forward, what would be our next steps involving our kids, he pretty much said it, like, we do know something, you should ask us. And involving our kids in those steps, I think, would be important. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I think one thing I wonder if you'll speak to, it's probably something you know well, but I only learned a few years ago, which was that when it snows, you mentioned about Mr. Dixon, but that literally he or others drive all the key roads. So they will drive personally all the hardest roads throughout the district, so that nobody's trying it for the first time with a student or a member of our community trying to do it on the fly. So I thought it was something worth talking about.
Yes, particularly Somerset Hill, which is one of our most challenging hills. But yes, he and others will, but particularly him, will go out and drive the roads and drive the hills, and then call. Generally, it's our deputy superintendent, Melissa DeVita, and she will call me, and she'll call the superintendent, and we'll talk about those conditions and whether or not we think they're going to change, or even if it's not going to snow anymore, is it going to stay frozen? Or even if it's been raining, is it going to freeze? And do we need to delay school or cancel school? And we have to make that decision. Sometimes the snow comes after school has started, unexpectedly, but we try to follow the forecast and the hour by hour and literally drive the roads in the middle of the night.
Thank you. I just wanted to say on the computer science update, I appreciate that we made a decision. I think it's the right one to go forward with our meeting tonight, but we know some things were impacted by the fact that we didn't have school today, and accessibility to tonight's meeting was not necessarily easy for everybody. So we're going to then hear from the team that you mentioned at a future board meeting. Is that, I just want to know for clarity for others, the team that was going to present.
We certainly can. We can put that on.
I think it might be helpful to hear from board directors on, we have a few minutes between now and when we were going to start public comment.
Okay.
I would just like to, I don't want to necessarily have you try to field questions that you weren't necessarily ready for, but I would like to just find out what the thoughts are of board directors on whether having a presentation pulled forward to another time is desired, or what the feeling is. I do see a hand raised, Director Chu.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I would love to hear an update on this. And there are two things that I'd really appreciate hearing about. They didn't jump out at me from the presentation and the other document. So one is we've got, I think, 5 schools that have the full-time CS in the elementary, right? And I'm wondering what the plan is to bring that to the others. What's the timeline? I hope there is one, but I didn't see it. I might have just missed it. And then the other question that I have is, how does this fit in with the work we're doing on Creators of Our Future World and reimagining middle schools? I like, in an effort to really respect an ongoing desire from our stakeholders, teachers, families alike, to not have 2,000 initiatives going on that we all have to keep track of. Well, how does this all fit together for them and for our kids ultimately? That would be really helpful. Just a little bit of contextualization, both currently, but really as we move forward. So thank you. Anyway, yeah, that's my ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other board directors who want to ask a question or make a comment, knowing that we will work to get this pulled forward in terms of an opportunity here more broadly? Vice President Watson?
Yeah, I feel like I sort of have an understanding of AP computer science and high school computer science. I really don't have a lot of clarity on K-5, so I'd like to know more about that. And I see that we have computer science facilitator teachers in the schools, but in some cases we're integrating it in what goes on in the regular classroom. So I just am wondering a bit about the perspective of the teachers and how they feel it's going for them, especially since some of them may not have studied computer science particularly in college. So I'm just curious about that.
Great. Director Aris?
Yeah, actually, mine is kind of piggybacking on both Dr. Chu and Dr. Watson's. I guess I would like to ask and see if we have a roadmap of how all of this fits in to make sure that we're not overburdening our staff as they are, constantly learning new things for our students and trying to handle what's already on their plate. And also, as well as what Dr. Watson has said is how are we supporting them with training to making sure that they feel confident as they lead the students in this space. Would love to hear more about that and how it could be continuous, or if it's not, or if it's a one-shot deal, or all of that. But that'll be great. Thank you.
Great.
Oh,
thank you.
One other thing, I want to say thank you to the our transportation people, because living on Somerset, I understand how arduous that road is. I'm impressed because I won't go on it during ice and snow.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Superintendent Collins. We lost your image, but thank you for joining and stepping in. So at this time, we go to item 4, our public comment. So if we can advance that slide, I know we have some people here for public comment, and while our board coordinator projects on the screen the notice we give for public comment, I will start this by just reminding everybody of our rules and our thoughts around this. This is the time during our meeting when we receive public comment. And details about our public comment and our expectations are on our agenda. They're displayed on the screen. So we want you to know a few things. First of all, remember that you can communicate with us also by email or voicemail. But in terms of this evening, we're grateful to receive public comment, and we appreciate the thoughtful input of our community. Because of the limitations of our calendar, we limit public comment to 20 minutes total, and we ask that your remarks be limited to not more than 2 minutes. We as a board will listen to all your comments carefully, but we generally don't respond in the moment. We expect speakers to engage in a civil manner and not engage in any form of communication that would be identified as unacceptable, including slander, libel, invasion of privacy, obscenity, harassment, intimidation, bullying, or discrimination. We also can't accept public comment on pending investigations involving student discipline, allegations of employee misconduct, allegation of discrimination or harassment. And we don't do this so that we can preserve our ability to hear any appeals on those topics. But back to the initial point, We thank you, and we know that this is important to you as a community. It's important to us also. So you should know that while we'll be listening to all comments intently, we'll generally not respond to the comments in this setting. So with that, we ask our board coordinator, do you have anybody ready for public comment?
Thank you. I have two public commenters who signed up in advance, and so I'm going to have them go first. First up is going to be Joel Ingraham, and Joel, I'm clicking the button to allow you to turn on your camera and mic. Joel, we see you, but you're still on mute. Hi, Joel. We'll come back to you. We're going to go to Randy Litzenberger first, and we'll come back to Joel second. Okay, so Randy, I just clicked the button to allow you to turn on your camera and mic, and we can see you. Can you hear us, and can we hear you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much for the time this evening. Good evening, members of the board. I'm pleased to take this opportunity tonight to speak to you and those assembled. My name is Randy Litzenberger. I teach social studies at Bellevue High School. I'm also a parent of two students in the Seattle Public School District, a longtime BEA member here in Bellevue as well, member of our school safety emergency preparedness team. And this evening, I have, as you know, already submitted to the board a resolution that was supported and passed by a clear majority of the Bellevue Education Association Representative Council earlier this fall. And it speaks to this question about the reintroduction of what are now being referred to as community engagement officers back to our district. And I believe that with my qualifications, I'm one voice of a chorus of teachers now that have considerations on this. The recent fatal shooting of a student at Ingram High School has certainly brought all this attention to it. And it has been something that reminds us very much how vulnerable we can be in our schools and our communities during this time of violence. Our hearts go out to those families and those community members whose lives have been shattered by violence. There's no denying the need to be prepared for active threats in our schools. I would suggest that a reasonable question for us to be considering at this time is how best do we accomplish this readiness? And along with the majority of the Bellevue Representative Council, I believe that reintroducing police officers to our schools will not make our students safer. We have been reminded certainly by the events in Parkland, Florida a few years ago, as well as more recently in Uvalde, Texas, about the limitations that exist with law enforcement keeping our schools safe. I think that ultimately what we need to do is understand that the presence of police officers on our campus risks the reintroduction of historic inequities that our communities have suffered under. I would hope that our school district is willing to consider a different approach, reinvesting instead those resources in counselors, mental health counselors as well. And I would like to shout out to Doug James, the great work that our school is already doing in terms of safety and preparation. So I'm happy to share more of it another time as my time has expired.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Litzenberger, Randy, as I know you. So thank you for coming and for taking the time. I appreciate it. Okay, are we ready for our next public commenter?
Okay, Joel Ingraham, if you're still with us, please let us know if you're able to unmute. Okay, I see you've got your hand up. Okay, let's give it a try now.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Right.
Please go ahead.
Technical difficulties. I'm here tonight to talk about policy and literacy. And I'd also first like to start off by saying that the district has made amazing progress. The district is using DIBELS, which is a top-notch assessment that is based and really measures decoding skills and foundational skills that are the foundation of the science of reading. And as these pieces come together, it seems like the biggest missing piece is that tier 1 phonics instruction that we're not getting. And I am aware that the literacy adoption is currently taking place, but my question is what are we doing now? What are we doing this year for the students who currently need intervention and support? And how do we start in tier 1? And with that specifically, when we're talking about sustainability in the district, we know that early intervention is key and is more cost effective for students. So last year, one of my students was able to participate in a reading club. This year, that's no longer an option. And so as we look at the different schools, it doesn't seem like there's a consistent approach to how we intervene for our students. So my ask is, what resources from the district level can we roll out to all schools? The second item is, as we still are using a balanced literacy curriculum, it's not guaranteed that our students will receive phonics instruction at the classroom level. The teacher still has the discretion as far as which instructional method they're going to use with their students. How can we move the district forward so that there's a literacy or instructional policy that makes it certain that it doesn't matter what classroom your student is in, but your student will learn to read and will learn how to decode and not just be given cueing strategies that are essentially guessing. So once again, I am truly appreciative of all the great work Bellevue is doing, but we have students who are struggling now, and anything we can do now is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I see another, I will let our board coordinator decide who else may be speaking, but it appears that there might be more people.
Thank you. I was going to ask if folks can use the raise hand button if you would like to be a public commenter. I see 2 folks have already done that, so that's wonderful. I'm going to go in the order that you raised your hands. Nathan Hoff is going to be up first. And Nathan, you should have the ability to turn on your camera and microphone now.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Hi, I'm Nathan Hoff. I'm here to represent the Family Advisory Committee with this public statement to follow up our meeting with district and Bellevue police officials regarding the proposed CEO program. First, while the program has been renamed, it still brings police officers with guns into schools. The new proposal has police officers assigned to all K-12 schools, including elementary, representing a downshift to also policing our youngest children. Second, in this meeting, it was clear that the armed police officers' primary role and responsibility will be as Bellevue City police officers, operating under the rules and regulations of their training provided by the police department and not subject to district guidelines and policies. Third, we believe the budget to put police officers in our schools should be spent on direct support for students with additional counselors, nurses, psychologists, social workers, and more teachers to more directly prevent violence in schools and make it so every student can feel they have a trusted adult in their community. Lastly, the Family Advisory Committee has many questions that were not addressed by the initial plan or in the meeting. Among them, what specific training will the selected officers receive? How often will selected officers engage in training? What accountability structures will be in place to ensure that students are not harmed by police officers and the police officers are held to a high standard of anti-racist, culturally responsive, and trauma-informed practices? How will decisions be made about service calls? How will families be involved in joint decision-making? How will the selected police officers represent our Bellevue School District communities? How will Bellevue School District shift power dynamics so the burden of complaint is not on the victim of trauma? We invite the team working on this plan to come back to the Family Advisory Committee and share how the district plans to move forward with revisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hoff. We're going to take a 5-minute recess just to briefly determine if we can create an enablement of functionality around our captions. So I'd like to be able to give folks a minute or 2 to sort that out. So we'll just stand in recess for 5 minutes. We will come back at 5:11. We will not shortchange or shorten our meeting or the public comment. We just want to make sure everything works. Do we have it?
On. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna ask actually our, okay, got it. She got it fixed. So if, just one second. Okay, so we will not take a recess. We're good. We go forward with the next public commenter.
Okay, so that would be Adam Roble. And Adam, I am pressing the button to allow you to turn your mic and camera on.
All right, there we go. Perfect. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. We would like to reintroduce ourselves. We are student community leaders representing Eastside Youth Coalition. Eastside Youth Coalition serves high school students throughout the East Side. Our mission is to provide Black, Latinx, and historically marginalized youth with racially and culturally relevant programs in a safe community where they are valued. We are concerned about the community engagement process regarding the CEO program. During the feedback session about the proposed Community Engagement Officer program at Interlake High School, 4 out of the 1,720 students showed up. This is nowhere near sufficient feedback. In previous communication, our primary concern was ensuring that proper outreach is achieved and changes are heard and acted upon. Outreach is a necessity to collect accurate data about student and community feedback, and this plays a direct role in the ongoing conversation about police in schools. We would like direct outreach and full transparency on what the program entails. This can look like reaching out to affinity groups and advisors across Bellevue School District to have an open dialogue in a safe space, or holding in-class videos and PowerPoints to increase student awareness of the proposed program. The relationship between police officers and marginalized students is a complex matter that takes not only time, but investment to build trust. To reiterate, we believe that the community engagement process should strive to deeply engage stakeholders and students in the development of policing in schools. Language regarding this proposed program should highlight that a clear decision hasn't been made as of yet and curate an environment that promotes all perspectives of policing in schools. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Collins and School Board, for allowing me to speak to you this evening regarding this crucial topic. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm going to ask our board coordinator. Oh, we have a hand raised. Director Chu?
If we're at the end of comments, which I think you're checking with Hannah on, I'll just say when we're at the end.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I was just going to confirm. I think you're right, but if I could just get a second.
No, yeah, I just want to wait. I'll make my comment when we're at the end.
Okay, board coordinator, Hannah Worth.
Yeah,
if you look at, yeah, are we sure there's no one else?
I do not see any other hands raised. Folks, this is your last chance to press that button. I'm going to give you a 1, 2, 3, and I don't see any other hands raised.
All right,
Okay,
Seema, I'm just going to
Yeah,
chime in
please go
quick
ahead.
then.
Please go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say thank you to everyone who made comments, but also to our student, Adam. I know that I had heard that there was some confusion about whether or not students are welcome or encouraged to be here and giving comments. And I want to just reiterate, like, we as a board deeply appreciate and utilize comments that are brought to us, particularly those from our closest stakeholders, including our students. And we want strongly to encourage and know that students are strongly encouraged to be here to participate in this process and to be part of it. There are many ways that we solicit voice, and this is just one of them. But please know that it is a method for everyone, and we strongly encourage all of you to use it. And we thank those of you who take the time to do so, particularly, especially our students. So Adam, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Director Chu. And I think, Adam, you can take it that all of us have that shared sentiment. So thank you. We now go to item 5 on our agenda. It is our annual organizational meeting. For any anybody who was here for public comment, you are free to stay and watch the rest of the meeting. You're also free to drop off. We are not offended or unhappy either way. So we just want you to know that. We say that when we're in person. I want to make sure you know that online too. Okay, so as we go to what is on item 5 of our agenda, which is our annual organizational meeting, I start by simply saying we have three different officer roles to review, and then we to vote on, and then we go to our DAC position, and then we go to board liaisons. For the first position, the election of board president, I will be asking our vice president, Carolyn Watson, to preside over this part of the process.
Okay. So as we're starting the board elections, and I'll chair this first bit, the president piece, I'd like to outline some of the rules that we have around this. So for nomination, you can self-nominate or you can nominate somebody else. For time to speak, we're going to have 2 minutes for each nominee to offer a statement, and we'll have the time on the clock. And I'm going to call on people in alphabetical order. And then when we get down to voting, when I call on you for your vote, you can state the name of the person for whom you cast your vote, even if there's only one person nominated. So may I start with president and say, anyone interested in self-nominating or nominating another board director, please raise your hand. And okay, do I see Seema? Whoops, can't hear you.
Yes, you do. You see
okay.
me. I didn't raise my virtual hand, and I probably should have.
There you go.
So you see my virtual hand and now my actual hand.
Okay.
So I self-nominate myself as board president and ask for someone to consider a second.
And I'm going to second that.
Thank you. Do I make my statement now, or do you want to see if there's
let's
any
see if
other...
anybody else is nominating themselves or others. Should we do the little countdown? 1, 2, 3. Okay. I don't know if we have just one person. Then I don't know that we need to do the 2-minute speech. Would you like to?
Well, I'll go ahead and say some things because I think
okay.
They are, we do have people who are interested in our district, and what I have to say is less about me and more about, frankly, our board. So I'd be happy to take the 2 minutes, but my screen is limited, so cut me off if I go above the 2 minutes. Aggressively cut me off. So let's
maybe we can get the timer up.
Okay. Okay, I need to make sure.
Hannah, are we able to get the timer up?
In process.
There we go.
Okay. It's been an honor to serve as board president this year. All of us build on the good work that came before us. And this past year, our board worked really hard to focus on several things while partnering closely with our superintendent and his executive team. From a successful levy to collaborative bargaining, extensive community engagement, strong district communication, and a strong school year so far, these are the good work of our entire community. As a board, we've changed our regular board meetings to allow for more depth and opportunities to discuss what's top of mind. We found ways for all 5 of us to work together in open pre-board planning sessions. This is a credit to our entire board. We've also created more opportunities for study sessions and workshops where we've dived into topics ranging from our school improvement plans, assessments, digital discovery, governance, many other topics. But looking at tonight's meeting, I'm pleased that together our board changed how we have our meetings to make public comment not only more consistent in its time and predictability, but also to extend our online capabilities to make our meetings more accessible to our entire community. This is a credit, again, to our entire board. We know that it ensures that we hear from a range of voices and views. As we look ahead, I look forward to a continued successful superintendent search, strong collaboration on our strategic plan, and more work on areas I know are important to many of us: mental health, supporting special needs, accessibility, sustainability, but more importantly, probably shown tonight, it's ensuring ways to find ways that we can amplify and include our community, particularly student voice, in our decision making. I know that that's a shared value of all of us. So thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to do a vote by name in alphabetical order. And when I do call on you, please state the name of the person that you're voting for. So starting with Director Aras.
We're stating the name or just we're voting yes?
Yeah, we're doing the name. Even if
Okay.
there's only one person, we're just going to affirmatively state the name.
Okay, Seema, Seraphin.
Thank you. All right, Director Chu.
Seema Seraphin.
All right, Director Seraphin.
Seraphin.
All right, Director Shui.
Seema Seraphin.
And Director Watson says Seema Seraphin. So thank you. And congratulations to President Seraphin. And I'm going to hand the virtual mic back.
Okay, all right. We now go to the office of Vice President. And I will ask anyone who wishes to nominate themselves or someone else to please raise your hand, either virtually or physically. Okay, I see one hand raised. Vice President Watson?
I am sorry because I wasn't able to discuss this with the person involved, but I would like to nominate Director Shui.
Director Shui, you might want to.
Yeah, you could second it if you accept.
And then we have discussion. I'm honored and thank you. I'll second it for the purposes of discussion. Thank you.
Director Chu?
I would like to nominate Director Aras.
Director Aras, would you like to accept by seconding your nomination?
I'll accept.
Okay, both nominations having been seconded, we'll go ahead and take the 2 minutes for each board director. I believe we're going in alphabetical order. So we will start with Director Aras. If you would like to make a statement, would you like to go ahead?
Can we go reverse alpha, please?
I think the rule was going to be alphabetical order. So if you could go first,
okay.
unless you agreed, the two of you, you'd like to flip it around, I think it might be just easier to go alphabetical order.
Perhaps the right thing to do is flip a coin instead of always, like, for some of the purposes of this.
Well, I will say we had a rule. It was outlined at the beginning. I don't really know in the physical space who's going to be flipping a coin. So I would suggest we go in just alphabetical order. If this is a big issue for someone, we can take 2 minutes recess and figure this out.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Director Chu, for nominating me. I appreciate that. I did not plan a 2-minute speech here, but I will say I'm honored to be considered for this position. I believe this is only completing 1 year on this board. I have limited experience in this space, but I do have depth in education, having special education and general education experience. And it is a space I'm very passionate about, as I think you all have witnessed. This is a space I was elected into to put majority of my personal time into outside of all of my other dedicated space. So I'm going to step up and give it all, as you have heard me, as I've been advocating strongly in making sure that our students' needs are being met, especially recently in the special education space. So thanks. Though I have to say, if I step up to this space, I hope to get all of your experience guidance.
Thank you, Director Aris. So we now go to, if we can reset the clock, please, we go to Director Shuey, and nobody needs to use their entire time, by the way. So that was great. We are guided by the clock, but you can stop whenever you like. So Director Shuey.
Sure, thanks. Likewise, I don't have a 2-minute speech prepared either. I am, like Director Aris said, honored because I do really love my work on the school board, and with all 5 of us, I believe that we come to our work with very similar passion and very similar intent and commitment to equity, and I really, really appreciate that. I also am in the position of understanding how it is hard to be in a situation where there's a contested role. I remember last year I said that it would be great to have multiple people interested in a role, and so now that I'm in it, I understand that it is difficult for those who are in it. But I am honored to be considered next to Jane, who is the one who got me into my work on the board, and I continue to appreciate that introduction into the life of education and education politics. I do believe that I know that I would bring the passion that I've brought over the last year into the role as vice president. I am, as people know, direct but empathetic, and I have a lot of energy and a lot of passion to provide into the role, and will continue to represent all 5 of us and our joint commitment to equity for each and every student and all the families and all of the educators and staff. So, thank you.
Okay, this time we will vote. We will vote the same way that Director Watson outlined. So at this time we will, yes, Director Chu.
There's no discussion opportunity or time for people to make statements in support. It's just a vote.
It is a vote. I mean, that was the rules we outlined, which was each
We've never
person
used that rule before. Is there a reason we're using it now? Like, did we agree to those? Did we vote on them?
If you'd like to make a motion to do, as we have in the past had the chair outline the rules, but if you'd like to make a motion, please go ahead, and we're happy to have it seconded. And if you'd like to make a proposed change in how we do the meeting tonight, we're happy to do that. What is your proposal?
My proposal was just that we would have a chance for the 3 of us who aren't running to also have a chance to give input or to discuss. That is all.
I would just like you to articulate, what discussion do you mean? Do you mean last year you said, can we do a Q&A? Last year we didn't know each other, but I think this year it might, if you'd like to make a statement, we can have a 1 minute, we could have a proposal for a statement from each board director, if that's, or any director who'd wish. Is that your proposal? I'd just like to understand what your motion is, and then we can get a second and we can go from there.
I guess my proposal is that we would treat this as we treat anything, where we are able to make a statement and or have a discussion with each other as needed before we take a vote. That's all.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and propose that anybody who wishes to make a statement or go ahead and speak up to 1 minute about, and we can go from there. So why don't we start with Director Chu? Would that work?
Sure, that's fine. I thought general counsel just popped up, so I don't know if there was something being said there about process. Or maybe that was my mouse. I don't know.
Yeah, so I had, just so we're clear, I had reviewed this with our board secretary as well as general counsel. But if you would like to have a minute, why don't we go ahead and change the clock, and please go ahead.
Thanks. I think that this process just points out that while we have made progress as a board, we still have a long way to go in terms of being able to truly model the inclusivity that we yearn for in our district for our students and our staff and our families, to also extend to the board in the way that people are invited to participate, and to move away from decision-making sans deep collaboration. And I think that one of the reasons I nominated Jane is because I think that Director Harris has an enormous amount of compassion and empathy that she extends, and her life experiences extend over a vast number of different programs, different experiences, different cultures, and different parts of our district. And I thought that it would be really helpful for us to have that bridging piece and to really work together in the moment. I think you recover in the work, and I'd love to see her represent us in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Watson, would you like to say anything, or is there anybody else who'd like to say anything?
Sure. Well, let me just say why I nominated Joyce, because I find Joyce to be a deep thinker who is also fair-minded. I feel that she's got a very deep commitment to equity and hearing and understanding the voices of all people. She sometimes has a divergent viewpoint, or a viewpoint that is not the same as my viewpoint, yet we are always able to disagree in an agreeable fashion. So she's very personable in that way, but very committed to her beliefs. And I just think that she would bring a valuable perspective to the work of organizing the meetings and deciding the agenda. I mean, what does the vice president really do? Support the president and kind of consider what are the follow-ups from the meetings and things like that. I think she'd be fantastic.
Okay, I will make a 1-minute statement or less. I will just say, before we do take our vote, it was important to me, as I thought of how we could have our meeting tonight, to ensure that we were doing it in a way that was respectful to all candidates. And for me, that means having it so that we are saying each other's names and not saying yes or no, because there's no to any of these candidates. We have, I'd say, the luxury of having outstanding board directors. And if you read about the bios of any of our board directors, as I hope maybe our prospective superintendent candidates are, you really see educated, well-versed, very thoughtful and deep thinkers across all of our board directors. And I will say this, and last year are the first times I've actually seen what I'd say are positive contested elections, not just one person saying they will run. And I think that's a great and wonderful thing. So with that, I think it's time to call the question. So at this time, we'll start in alphabetical order, and I simply ask you to, when called on, just please say the name of the person for whom you cast your vote for vice president. And before we do that, I just do want to take a moment to say thank you to Vice President Watson, because it was a pleasure to have you this last year as vice president. So I'll start by calling on Director Aris and going alphabetically through. When I call your name, just you can give the last name or the first and last name of the candidate for whom you cast the vote. So starting with Director Aris, for whom do you cast your vote?
Jane Aris.
Director Chu?
Jane Aris.
I'll call on myself, Joyce Shuey. Director Shuey?
Joyce Shuey.
Vice President Watson?
Joyce Shuey.
5.4, appointment of our legislative rep. Please raise your hand if you would like to have yourself nominated or you wish to nominate someone else for legislative representative. Director Aris, do you have a nomination?
Kristen Chu.
I second your motion. Do we have any discussion? And if not, may I have a statement of up to 2 minutes from Director Chu?
Are there any other nominations or anything? I don't want to interrupt the process.
I don't believe there are, but.
And do we do the backup ledge rep after the ledge rep? Is that how that works?
You know, I'd actually love to do this one first and then do the backup because
Yeah,
I
that's
looked
fine.
at
I was
our,
just asking. That's
yeah,
fine.
I don't believe we've ever, like, I looked at past ones and I didn't see in our policy actually a formal vote on backup. So I wondered about that. So let's first do ledge rep and let's then take that question because I think we have informally had essentially two people in this capacity and we might need a little input before we decide that. So why don't we start with a statement from Director Chu, if you wish to make one, and then we'll take consistent with then the last vote, if there's anybody who'd like to make an additional statement of 1 minute.
I would just like to thank Director Aris for the nomination and Seema for Serafan for the second. I would be honored to continue in this role. There's some really important work that we're trying to do right now which includes particularly getting funding from the state on special education, acknowledging the need for regionalization factors, and also acknowledging the higher costs of educating students that actually take care of student well-being and health, and the additional costs associated with multiple language learning and with special education, and even with supporting students and families in poverty. And we have a lot of work to do where the state needs to acknowledge its work there and the federal government. I have a lot of work in process there, and I would appreciate the opportunity to continue that on behalf of the district as well as other things. I'm happy to talk more about these things if you want in my minute and a half, but I'm happy to stop there and just take any questions that anyone has about the work.
I don't see any questions, but I'm, oh, sorry.
I was just
I
going to
did
say,
I was going to offer a minute of statement, but why don't you
I
go
just
first?
was going to say, I think you've been good at this. I mean, I just think you're sharp and on top of things. That's all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think we all have a role to play in advocacy, and we all do play that role. And I'm happy to take a leadership role in it, but I think it's important that all of us play it and our students in our community. And I think that one thing I'd like to explore this year is how we might increase the impact of student voice on our board, whether that's by considering student members or by initiating a bigger relationship, a more formal relationship with the Superintendent's Advisory Council of Students. So I think that there's something there to be explored. And I will also say, before my time runs out, since I have another 20 seconds, that I think it does help to have a partner in this work because when you're talking to the legislators, it helps to have two perspectives in the room, not just one. When, if you're going to miss part of a meeting, it's great to have somebody that you know is up to speed on the particular work that's being done, not just on advocacy in general. And it also helps to bring someone else and make them feel comfortable, because when someone's done it for a while, folks are like, oh, I can't do that way. Well, sure, you're going to do it your way. But giving that chance for them to sort of warm up to it and get acclimated is useful too.
So I will take a minute and just say that I'm grateful to Director Chu for her legislative advocacy work. I was a ledge rep, and I would say I was not very good at it. And not only did she help support me, she often stepped in for me. And so I think the work you do in this space is really important and valuable. And I almost want to suggest, after we take our vote, that maybe we take a few minutes of a recess and we check with our general counsel about whether we could formalize what you proposed. And it might not be possible to do it right now, but is there a reason we couldn't have two formal legislative reps rather than the backup, which I think has been an informal thing? But
I think a backup is fine. I don't think it has to be a big formal thing. I think just agreeing that a backup and having somebody take on the role, we have voted to approve the backup in the past, and having that is fine. I don't think it has to be like, we don't have to get over fancy.
Well, it's not in I don't think it's in our policy, which is why I was asking. But with that, that's fair. Why don't we start? Why don't we take the vote? We'll start with Oh, I see a hand up. Director Aris, please go ahead.
Okay, I just want to make a quick statement here. I nominated Director Chu because being the alternate this past year, I've learned a ton watching and following and shadowing, and realized, oh my goodness, she's amazing, and she's in midst of, we're in midst of some great work and hoping to make some good traction. And I very much appreciate all the hard work that Director Chu has been working with, not just in our district, but across the King County and across the state, and opening up dialogues and collecting data and really advocating at all different levels. So I'd like to see her push that through. And I'll start the vote. And I'll say Director Chu.
Okay, we now go to Director Chu.
Christine Chu.
Okay, my vote, Christine Chu. Director Shuey.
Thank you for all the great work you've done, Christine Chu.
And Director Watson.
Director Chu.
Okay, congratulations, Director Chu. All right, I'm going to just ask, I do realize that you said we don't need to, but I would just like to ask if it feels like we have a opportunity to consider just formalizing our, whether we call it alternate or however we want to do it. So I would just like to take a second to just hear from our general counsel.
If you're going to do that, can I
Yeah.
add a question to it so that we can?
Please go ahead. Let's do it.
So I think that we've done it for board liaisons as well. Like Joyce was my backup on BSF, and the Disciplinary Appeals Council. One of the most important things I think we did last year was we not only assigned a first backup, we acknowledged that all board directors could be backup in cases that weren't. And we had a case this year where the actual DAC representative couldn't be reached in time for a case. And so the backup wasn't available and had to go to one of the rest of us. I think it's a good practice to have backups. And I think for the DAC in particular, I would like to continue that practice of making sure that we formalize so that there's no question about whether the person who participated was indeed approved by the board as a representative. So as we go to Shannon, I think just asking overall if we need additional policy to acknowledge backups for positions that exist, and if we do, what that looks like, because if we've done it to date on all of these different places for LEDREP, for DAC, and for board liaisons. And so if there's something special we need to do, that'd be great, but let's just make sure that we cover it for all of them if we're going to go down that road.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I'm not trying to make it harder. I was thinking that the amount of work that the backup has been doing on LEDREP has been pretty tremendous. So I wondered, since you co-partner on this, if it would be valuable to have that formalization. If it's not, we don't need to. I just noticed, I noticed how much work you partnered with, and I thought that might be a benefit. That may not be desired by others, in which case we don't need to, but I do appreciate your point. You raised it before about DAC, and I think it's well put about the importance that any board director can step into the backup DAC role. So I concur with you. I just,
Yeah, one more thing to throw to the attorney when we throw this there is that one of the things about LEDREP is that it's limited. We chose to term limit it to 2 consecutive terms. Somebody can come back after a while. But that then means, if somebody's serving as the co-LEDREP, have they wasted their time when they're really kind of preparing to potentially take that role in the future? We should just think through the whole picture so we don't end up sticking ourselves in the foot when we didn't intend to.
okay.
I know you had a good intent. I just wanted to think through.
I was just trying to say, like, if it's, I think you got my point. So go ahead, General Counsel.
Hi, under your on echo, I apologize. Under your policy 1220, you specifically identify 3 positions, and the legislative representative actually is the one position that is not term limited. It has for the ability to be elected beyond that, but only if there's no one else who's interested in the position. So it's a bit different than the other two positions. And certainly you can have a backup. It's just not listed in your policy right now, nor is it listed in the annual organization policy, which is a different policy. So
So
if the board wants to include that,
do we have to put it into the policy, or can we just have a backup? Like, I'm not clear.
I think that it makes sense to make it part of policy if you're looking for it to be a consistent thing. I don't see it being a hindrance to naming someone tonight and then doing the board policy update work after that.
And we
But I
we
do
have
think it
more
makes
work to do.
sense.
Yeah, we actually, Directors Watson and Aris have been working on some things relating to liaisons as well. So there may be more things coming down the pike. My intent to do something good may have just created more confusion, but because I also realized there's a single credential that we have to pass back and forth. So if it's more churn or work than it's worth, we can simply agree tonight by vote that our backup will be, as she has been, Director Aris, but we might have an opportunity to do more. So that's all I will say now. Director Watson has her hand up, but then can you also, General Counsel, speak to the DAC issue and what we could ensure is clear tonight in terms of the backup?
So both the designation of liaisons and the setting of the DAC are covered by different policies and procedures and are not expressly included in the annual organization meeting policy and procedure. So the annual organization meeting policy and procedure is very much focused on the president, vice president, and legislative rep circumstance. So there are different policies that apply. So you have some different policy language, but it identifies that the liaison will be designated, the liaisons will be made, designations will be made at the annual meeting. And certainly there's nothing in any of these policies that prevents you from having a backup for the liaison positions or for the legislative representative positions. And the DAC language was updated last year. So there's nothing that prohibits you from doing what it is that you have been doing. I just think that it would make, if this is a process that the board likes, and I do absolutely see the value of having backups, I would just recommend that when you have an opportunity to update policy 1210 and policy 1220 and policy 1221, that you expressly identify the adding of a primary and secondary representative. And I think maybe that language might be better than backup, a primary and a secondary, just because I think that there are times where as Director Chu mentioned, when doing legislative advocacy, including with WASDA, it is very important to have two people involved in the discussion or two people working a room. So I would suggest adding language about primary and secondary, but nothing would prohibit you from appointing liaisons in that manner or electing a secondary legislative representative tonight. But I think it'd be helpful to codify it in policy moving forward.
Okay. So it sounds, I see a hand raised by Director Watson, and then I will have a motion regarding a secondary ledge rep.
Well, it was just a thought I had on this whole thing about the term limit, and I'm glad to see that we didn't have a hard-coded term limit, because as I reflect on it, I feel like when you're ledge rep, you are not only following issues, multi-year issues very closely, you're also developing relationships with legislators and people like that. So it makes sense that if someone is gotten that underway, it may take more than 2 years. So unfortunately, that's the way things move. So that's all I wanted to add.
Is there anything additional on this? I'm going to make a motion for a secondary legislative representative, Jane Aris. Is there a second?
I second that.
Do we want to have any discussion or any statement? I'll make it completely optional at this point, but I want to make sure we don't take that away. Would anyone like to make a statement?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were giving Jane a chance to make a statement first or accept.
Anyone? Yeah, I wasn't sure, and I don't. It can be in any order. So so completely up to those of us here. If it's Director Aris, it would be up to 2 minutes. So if we want to revise that, if it's anyone else, we'll make it 1 minute. So Director Aris.
I'll just make a quick statement here. Thanks, Director Serafin and Director Chu for nominating me. I'm more than happy to step up in the formal position. For more informal, I'm appreciative of being able to do this work alongside with Director Chu. I think we're doing some amazing work and excited, hoping to make some progress in this space. So, and there's a ton to learn, and I appreciate all the opportunity to learn those skills. Thanks.
Thank you. If we could reset the clock, Director Chu, if you would like to speak.
I would like to speak. I would like to just say thank you to Director Aris for the work she's put into this space. I think it's not very visible to the rest of the board. And I'd like to say, like, one of the things we're working on right now, as I said, is special education funding. And when we're trying to, I've been going out and working with others across, like, I just reached out to 20 just local districts, and now we're reaching out to the 11 other biggest districts in the state, trying to collaborate with them. We're also working on some stuff with regionalization, et cetera. But for the special education stuff, I let Director Aris know we're trying to figure out how to put together a proposal that the legislators can put into motion. And immediately she set up a meeting with 2 of our biggest special education advocacy folks in the region. We met with them this week. They gave us some ideas both for internal policy and external policy for the state to press forward with. And you know, she's got connections with different legislators, and she's got all sorts of another network of folks across the state in the board director space. And she works very hard to find voices and get them heard. And I wish that you guys had more exposure to that, because it's really striking, and I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Chu. And for anyone listening who may drop off before we get there, item 6.2 tonight is approval of our legislative priorities. And I think that is one of the many things that reflect the collaboration of Directors Chu and Aris. So at this time, if there are no other statements, let's call the question. Why don't we go in reverse alpha just to mix it up? We'll start with Director Watson, and this is for Director Aris as a secondary legislative representative. How do you post your vote?
I vote for Director Aris for secondary legislative representative.
Okay, Director Shuey?
Director Aris.
Okay, Director Serafin? Director Aris? Director Chu?
Director Aris.
Director Aris?
Director Aris.
Okay, congratulations. You are revoted as our secondary legislative rep. We now go to the appointment of our disciplinary appeals council rep. Do we have a motion?
I don't know that we do. I'd just like to say I'm willing to do it because I think it's one of the single most important modes of advocacy that we can offer students. I've served on this many times, and in the cases that I have, I can see that every perspective in the room brings something different to bear. And it's important that the board not be left out because we're not available or accessible for this, and we need to make ourselves available. It's one of our most important advocacy roles. So I am certainly happy to take the role or to be a backup for it. But I actually ask that we all sign up to be backups for this, and that we make that official so that there's no question as to that legality.
Yeah, I see a hand raised from Vice President Shuey. Would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll echo what Director Chu said. It is a vitally important part of what we do on the board. And I have really loved every moment of it because of, as Director Chu, you learn from different perspectives. And when you've got 5 people serving, on a particular case, you really do bring a good range of perspectives and experiences. So I agree that we should have backup. One of the reasons that I said earlier that I would have liked to have discussion around the vice president situation is just sort of understanding how everything fits together. But given that I'm about to take on a new role, then I'm delighted that there could be somebody in this role, but it's a really, really important one.
Thank you. Director Aris?
I appreciate Director Chu's suggestion in having all of us being a backup role, and I'd be more than happy to step up in that space as well as being a backup. I think I concur on the importance of making sure our students' voices are being heard. So I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion as to I don't know if this is okay, but I was going to say our primary Disciplinary Appeals Council rep, Director Chu, our secondary Director Aris. I hear Director Chu saying we should also all be backups, and I think that's something we can write into our policy so that it is, I think, crystal clear that any board director can and will step in if our primary or secondary DAC reps are not available. So although I make the motion for the two of you respectively and seek a second, we can then have discussion and we'll split out the vote. But I think the point maybe you're making about making sure our policies are crystal clear is probably an opportunity we can have when we revise 1220, 1221. But for now, I would make the motion as a clear primary and secondary. Is there a second for the purpose of discussion, if nothing else?
I would second, but then I would motion to amend the proposal.
Go ahead.
To have me and then Jane and then to have any of the other three board directors as backup. And I'd like to formalize it because I don't want to like have something come up before we've modified the policy, have somebody have to step in and have any legal issues about that person. It is really important. Like I can't express anymore how important this is. And I have a lot of thoughts that I hope that we'll get a chance to tackle around depoliticizing this board and making sure that the workhorse roles are shared and aren't relegated to some and not all. But I think like at the very least, I'd like to formalize that the entire group is committed to serving in this and that we all vote to approve it.
Okay, I just want to understand your vote. Is it that your motion, is it that we have primary, secondary, and then all three of us serve as backup, or are you asking for third?
Yes.
I may have
Yeah,
lost.
no, exactly what you just said.
Okay. I see our general counsel's maybe unmuted to speak, but I'm not sure.
Yes, I just wanted to identify that in order to address any due process concerns raised by students or families, I think Director Chu's proposed amendment is the most efficient way to address this, as far as making sure that it is clear that the board has appointed all of you to serve as the DAC representatives, given the language in our current policy about appointment to serve as DAC representatives. And I think that it is a wise way to ensure that we can offer all of our students and families timely due process. And I see Mr. Harrison has his hand up, but I would just say from a procedural aspect, if I've tracked things correctly, Director Chu has made a motion to amend the main motion. And so I would suggest that somebody second that before you guys have further discussion. I was going
to ask, can someone So I renew the motion I made as amended by Director Chu. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So if we can hear from Executive Director Harrison.
I just wanted to, sorry about that. I just want to weigh in quickly on the DAC representation. The policy already says one or more alternates. So it's a representative and one or more alternates, which could be one or all of the remaining four of you.
Thank you. I think my sense is it's always been enabled, but it's not been crystal clear. So our opportunity is to revise the language going forward. Clearly, we've had the DAC for a long time, but it sounds like just we have the opportunity to make it crystal clear. I think tonight's
Actually,
motion
Seema,
will be.
just to be clear,
Yep, for-
I don't
yes?
think we need to change that of all the 3 different categories of backups. I think this one doesn't need the language change in the policy, as John Harrison just pointed out. I think we just need to vote for the 1 or more, and we're now voting for more. And I
Okay.
think that's all.
Okay,
I
Director
would
Watson?
concur with that as far as what is legally required. No policy change needed, just that all of you be formally appointed to serve.
Can I say something?
Yeah, I called on you, but I think I muted
Oh,
myself.
okay. I just wanted to comment that I think this is extremely important because I have not served on the DAC, but my understanding is that these cases come up kind of when they come up, and there's maybe that there's not everybody available and all that. But for me, philosophically, it's really important that someone from the board is available, because if you look at the composition of the DAC, you have 5 people, 3 of them basically report to the superintendent. And there's 2 people who don't. One would be the parent, and the other would be the school board member who's elected by the population. So I think it's really, really important that we be there.
Okay, thank you. I think unless there's any more discussion on this, I think it might be a good time to take a vote. I think for this vote, because it's a little bit complicated or long, why don't we just vote yay or nay? So, or we can raise our hands. So all those in favor of the motion as amended and seconded, Director Chu? Oh, okay, got it.
Oh, she's voting.
All those in favor, please raise your hand and or say aye. Aye, okay.
Aye.
The motion carries 5-0. Thank you. And congratulations to our DAC representatives. At this time, if I can ask our, as we go to board liaisons, item 5.6, if I could ask our board coordinator to please project, I think the memo that had the chart, it might help us navigate through the board liaisons.
We will pull that up.
We'll just take a 2-minute recess. We'll come back at 6:02. Give us a chance to stretch and take a break, and we will come right back. Thank you. Okay, we're back on the record, returning from our recess. So we reconvene our meeting, and as we do, I ask that we go through this, starting with Bellevue Schools Foundation. But I will just say that this form, if you see anything on here that's not in your mind, it's not accurate, let's just call it out as we go, and we will work through it together. So I think if we can ask Jess or Hannah if we can project this a little bit higher, so we start with where it says liaisons. Okay, that's perfect. So I think what we may wish to do is we can either go in the order these are listed, or we can start with anything that somebody knows that they definitely want to do. I'm happy to start by saying I did a Youth Link this past year. There's 2 years limit, and so this would be my second year. I'd like to do it again. It would be great to have either somebody considered an alternate, or if we want to do primary or secondary, there's nothing preventing more than one board director from attending. So I would just say I'm happy to talk about Youth Link, but I would like to do it again. I think I mentioned it the last meeting, but just want to reiterate that. So I'm currently doing it. If I do it this year, it would be a second year. Is there anybody else who wants to just start off with something they know they would very much like to do again? Director Chu?
So mine are both term limited this year. So I'm handing both Bellevue Schools Foundation and Eastside Pathways off because I've done the 2 consecutive years. I would be happy to do Jubilee Reach, Special Needs PTSA, or PTSA Council, depending on what needs attention.
Okay, I have traditionally been doing PTSA Council, and I wasn't it last year, so I'm not term limited, and special needs. So I will just say I'll always like doing them, but I recognize the need to give other people a turn. But those are, I prefer those. But I was thinking that I was doing Jubilee Reach, but I don't feel like I did a great job, especially since I couldn't go to the big gala because of it being dangerous for me. So maybe we could switch, and I could do Eastside Pathways, because you can just talk to the executive director and you can show up at that big all hands meeting, but you don't have to eat a fancy dinner and take your mask off. So maybe that'd be good. I'm thinking of the practicalities. I see Christine's just looking at me like, what?
So it sounds like, well, why don't we start? So Youth Link, I would like to do. Is there anybody who would like to be an alternate, or we'll say backup alternate secondary on Youth Link? That's just something to think about. But now we go to Jubilee Reach. I heard a clear interest by Director Chu, and I didn't hear Director Watson suggest anything other than that would be a great idea. So
right,
I think
that would be a great idea.
Yeah, are we
Well,
good?
I don't think we have to throw me there. Like, I'd like to hear what others need. I know that Jane had mentioned an interest in Eastside Pathways and something else.
Okay.
So I just want to, like, I'm not trying to assign it before somebody else gets a chance to talk. I just wanted to say, here are 3 that I think I am qualified to do. And I think Jane is likely to do Rainier Athletes for a second year. You said Youth Link. I can't do the other 2. So I'm basically saying the 3 that I'm open for, I'm open for.
Okay, I think Hannah's trying to just Hannah's trying to simultaneously jot down, but I was like, hey, don't write things down until we've had a chance to discuss. So I'm thinking,
I wonder
maybe
if there's some other method with, I don't know.
Well, how about if we do this?
We could all just say what we're interested in, put it all
Yeah,
out
we can
there,
either
and then
go. We can either go person by person, or we can say, hey, Jubilee Reach, who are all the people who might be interested? Or Youth Link, who are all the people who might be interested? We can do this any number of ways. So why don't we? I mentioned Youth Link. Is there anybody else who would also like to do Youth Link? If the answer's yes, let's get your hand up. If the answer's no, why don't we for now put my name down? We can always come back. And then we go to Jubilee Reach. If we'd rather go person by person and have each person name all the things they're interested in, we can do that too. Director Chu?
Could we just put down anything that somebody's currently serving on and is open to a second year of, and get those names out there? Because I personally, if I were voting or something, I would always vote to keep somebody in place for a second year unless there had been some problem, because I think that these are relationship development pieces and it's helpful to give people the opportunity to spend 2 years at something. So yeah, I would just like put those
I
out there
think this
for.
piece of it, I will just say we did not script very well, so
No,
so forgive me if we did not do this part as well as we could
I
have.
wonder
I
if we
will
should
just
just
admit
put all
that.
the names down, like on every, like Youth Link, all the names, special needs, all the names, Rainier athletes, all the names. And then we can see a pattern, like, maybe somebody has got a lot of them and somebody only has the one, and we could kind of figure it from
Yeah.
there.
Okay,
Well, what I was suggesting is that we could just first establish, are there any that have somebody who's going to continue? Because
I think
Seema's
that's fair.
basically year 2 on Youth Link. Great, leave it
Yeah.
alone. We don't need to spend any more time on it. Are there
Okay,
any others
okay.
where someone wants to continue?
is there anyone where somebody is in year 1 and would want to continue to year 2?
I'll continue on the Rainier athletes.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Well, that narrows it down a bit.
Okay, we have this Jubilee Reach. I heard Director Chu, and would that be your first year or your second year, Director Chu?
It will be her
It would-
first.
It would be
I
my
think-
first non-continuing year. I don't need to take that one. I'm just saying I can take Jubilee, PTSA Council, or Special Needs PTSA. I can take any one of those. I'm happy to do it, and joyfully will do so. But I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to do, especially since some folks here are newer and haven't had the chance to explore some of these before. It'd be nice if the newer members jumped in and said, hey, I'd really like a chance to do X or Y, and we give them some space to do that.
Okay, so I'm just going to focus on those 3 then for now. Is there anyone who wishes to also be considered for Jubilee Reach, PTSA Council, or Special Needs PTSA?
Well, I'll say I definitely would be excited about passing Jubilee Reach on to somebody who would do it better than I did.
Okay.
And I definitely will put my name in the hat for PTSA Council because I've been off it for a year. And Special Needs PTSA.
I will continue on the special ed PTSA. And if given the work that we're doing with the legislative staff around special education.
I'll withdraw my name. I didn't realize that one was something that you had done for a first year and it was up for a second. I don't need to do that. You should take that.
Well, actually, Christine, I would continue to do it, or if you would like to do it, I think you also would be benefit for you to be on it for all the work that you're doing around that right now. And so either one of us is fine. I think it may be more because a lot of things that happen, they're discussing or concerns they're bringing up, it is not new to me per se, but I think that this opportunity to have that discussions with the community in that space may be of value, especially with the work that we're doing right now. So
I'm happy to be alternate for that. I'm more than happy to be alternate. That sounds lovely.
Okay, so for Special Needs PTSA, we have Director Aris and alternate Director Chu. That's what I heard. Was there anybody who wished to be considered who did not get a chance to speak?
All right.
I would just say, that sounds great for them, but I'm a member there, so I will be at the meetings. That's all. But I think if we don't talk to each other, we don't violate OPMA. Just putting that out there.
Let's go to PTSA Council then following that, and just can I remember, I know Director Chu offered to be on there. Is there anybody else who wishes also to be considered for PTSA Council? I need to be reminded, Director Watson, were you on PTSA Council this last year?
My understanding was that it was Joyce.
Yeah, I was, and I participated remotely, but they really want somebody who will be in person.
Okay.
So I'm,
The last couple of times just to get people prepared for that. And I think that I mentioned that maybe because Director Watson, is there any way that that could be a possibility? But yeah, that was me. And they are aware that because they do express a preference for in person, that we will be looking for somebody else.
Okay, Director Watson, would you like to then?
well, it's
be-
one that I really like doing.
Okay, so we're going to put your name down for PTSA Council. Is there anybody who wishes to be a backup for PTSA Council or alternate on PTSA Council?
I can do that. I can be an alternate.
Okay, Director Chu.
And really, like, I don't think on these it's important to vote, but like if none of us can make it and there's an important meeting or event, as opposed to just the relationship maintenance, but there's an event, it's okay to just ask someone else to step in and be there so that the board is represented if for some reason you can't make an event. There's no shame in that. It's actually a compliment to the organization that we care enough to make an effort to get someone there.
I agree. Okay, so I'm going to suggest for Jubilee Reach. So far, Director Chu, I have not heard anybody else express an interest, so I'm going to go ahead and suggest we put your name down, and then we just ask one more time. Is there anybody who would want to be perhaps an alternate or the primary liaison for Jubilee Reach? Okay, so I'm hearing mainly Director Chu. That is a little bit, I think the PTSA are more intense, so I think it makes sense to have alternates for those. So for Jubilee Reach, I think the single contact could be really nice. So Eastside Pathways, I think that is one that you just finished your second year, Director Chu, correct? So do we have someone who would like to do Eastside Pathways? And do you want to say a few words about that? I'm wondering if you want to describe it a bit.
I think that it's one of the more important organizations that we participate in. When we talked about making modifications to policy 1221, whatever it is, our liaisonship one of the topics that came up was effectively, how do we as a board engage with our community? And so in some ways we were looking for that policy to give us guidance. And one way we engage with our community, among 1,000 other ways, is through liaisonships. That liaisonship is a bit unique because the organization is a small backbone organization, but it brings together 80 or plus organizations in our community who are all doing work for our community. So it's an opportunity to understand everything that's going on. And it's in our district participates in it at different levels. They are a collective action organization. And so there's an expectation that you'll have top level leadership, middle management, and actual people who are doing work participating in all the different and appropriate places. So one thing that I would advise is be careful that you don't feel yourself obligated to participate at every single level of that system. It's huge. And it's, as I said, over 80 organizations worth of folks who are trying to do work for us. And much of the work is being done at the district level. And you want to make sure that, they have these very specific CAN work groups, their action networks. And you want to make sure that they don't start using you as a spokesperson or you as the contact instead of an on the ground staff person who's actually doing work with them. And so just be sensitive in that one, that find your appropriate board level space that works for you, because it's going to be different for each person. They also have a new director coming on board. They have not yet hired them. As I said, it's a backbone organization, but they then bring a lot of organizations together. So it's a great learning experience and it's a great place to represent. But don't get overwhelmed. And talk to the superintendent too. If you're like, where are you guys covering? Where am I covering? What works here?
Before I call on Vice President Shuey or Director Watson, can I just ask, with them, how did you find that your engagement worked best? And I share that because
I did a mix of things. I met with their executive director. I occasionally met with their board chair. And I went to some of their events, like, and I think you could have more than one board director attend some of their events. They have like, all partner days and things like that, which I think it's important to have a board presence at. But I didn't go to every board meeting. And I also think you get trapped if you think that you're just going to board meetings for the backbone organization, because then you'll miss sight of the greater work that's being done, because that's being done by the broader collection of people. It's just a complex organization. So.
Okay, I think we've got thank you. We have a question from Vice President Shuey, and then one from Director Watson.
Yeah, just a question first. Thank you for that context, because that's really helpful to understand what these different organizations, like how they're organized and what the requirements might be. I have an accommodations question, which relates to whether the different organizations accommodate online participation, and whether they accommodate it just sort of philosophically, and also whether they accommodate it actually, because you have to have all the technology.
BSF accommodated online, like, completely, like zero problem. I met with Juliet, their director, yesterday online. The board meetings are online and in person. There's a combination. That one is very accommodating. Eastside Pathways did a lot online, but they're starting to bring people back together. And so I think that one is going to be, it's going to increase the presence piece, because I think that's part of how they're trying to bring their collective to work together. But you could ask them. Because I was there during the pandemic, a lot of it was online.
Okay, thank you.
Director Watson?
Well, I was just thinking, and you don't have to take this as anything other than just a suggestion, but from when I did Eastside Pathways before, I used to have a monthly coffee with Stephanie Charrington, and I felt like I wasn't quite getting where we needed to go with that. But what I did enjoy was I went to their Eastside Pathways one-on-one training, and then I went to the all partners meetings, and I'm almost wondering whether, like, since it seems like, for example, Joyce could meet with the executive director and do that. And then I could be like the alternate who goes to the all hands meetings, and then we could confer. That might work, because I really enjoyed the all hands meeting, just seeing all the different people, provided that I feel like it's safe enough, which I think historically had been in the Rainier room, and I'll wear my mask and I can go.
That sounds like an interesting idea. So what are your thoughts, Directors Watson, Vice President Shuey? Does that interest you, for you to kind of tag team on Eastside Pathways with one of you as the primary, the other one as the alternate? How would you like to do that? And is there anybody else, Director Aris, anyone else interested?
I was interested, but I was thinking on taking it on as the liaison. I'm not quite sure how the organization would feel having multiple contact points, but if Director Shuey and Director Watson wants to take it on in that way, that's fine with me. I already volunteer and participate in many different points of Eastside Pathways, so I'm already present.
Well, it was just a suggestion, and I was thinking I'd be more like the true kind of backup person who would go to those big meetings, but the other person would be the one who would have more of the relationship with the executive director and those kinds of things. That'd be the point person.
So one comment that Director Chu has made is just that Bellevue Schools Foundation was very fluid, it sounds like, to do things online. So to the extent that that's very important, I just want to underscore that. So if that's a dispositive factor for Vice President Shuey, you might want to consider that, and then we could consider the alternate there too.
I think it's a better fit. I think that the complexity, but I'm open. The complexity plus the fact that they've got and are moving back towards more in person that Eastside Pathways is, that the Bellevue School Foundation sounds like it's probably a better fit as between the two. But happy to tag team and be flexible.
Okay, so if I heard this right, would then Director Aris would be the primary lead for Eastside Pathways with Director Watson as the backup. Does that sound right? Or did I get that the other way around?
So I would say, sure, go ahead, be the primary. Just let me come to the all hands meetings and the all partners meetings and let me know when they are. That's all.
I'd like to suggest that Carolyn is stepping away from an officer position this year and isn't taking ledge rep and isn't taking the DAC. So like having her take a couple of these would be appropriate and actually preferred and appreciated. Like if we're going to spread things out so that this is manageable, I think sometimes these liaisonships, when somebody takes too many, it just becomes too much.
No, I see.
I could
Jane
step
has
away.
a few, but I don't want to be like the blocker from blocking her to do something she wants to do.
I don't think that's what anybody's saying. So, but I think that's for you and yeah. So I think this is a time not to be shy. If somebody would like Eastside Pathways, Director Aris, if it's something you kind of really were focused on and would like it, I think it's yours to have. If you kind of feel like you've got a growing list of to-dos and you'd rather not, then I think Director Chu's point is a good one.
No, I think Director Chu's point is a good point, and given that the work that I am doing on the liaison with Director Chu, I think if Director Watson wants to take it on, I'm more than happy for her to take on the full thing. Like I said, I already participated in multiple of their legs of the Eastside Pathway, so I'm already there. I don't necessarily need to take on the liaison role. I think the organization is great, and so I'd be more than happy to hand it off to Director Watson.
Okay, so let's get to Director Watson on Eastside Pathways.
Well, I'm going to say I will do it if I'm needed. I
think
but
there's
an
ask. I think there's an ask here. Eastside Pathways for you. I think the only thing I'm unclear about, Director Aris, is did you want to be alternate or not as much on Eastside Pathways?
If it needs an alternate, that's fine. Honestly, I don't know it really matters at this point.
You might be right. I think let's try it, and then as Director Chu said, any of us can and should be ready to be alternates where needed. So for Bellevue Schools Foundation, why don't we then have Director Shuey, Vice President Shuey, and then we won't have a formal alternate, but perhaps actually, well, any of us can consider stepping in as an alternate. I think for Eastside Pathways and Bellevue Schools Foundation, perhaps we put all for alternates, meaning any of us, unless Director Watson, would you like to be the alternate for Bellevue Schools Foundation? I think Director Chu's point is a good one. Officers are going to be stacking up a lot of work, so you may have more bandwidth. Would you be okay being the alternate for Bellevue Schools Foundation?
With adequate warning, because these people wake you up at the crack of dawn, make you turn up at 7:30 in the morning, allow you to be there for 20 minutes and then dismiss you. Do I still have resentment from the last time I did this? Maybe.
They're only meeting every other month at this point instead of every month. And also, I think one thing to keep in mind, and I wonder how this also impacts the vice presidential appointment, is that with Director Shuey's recusal from the superintendent search process and knowing that a lot of these liaisonships, one of the primary things related to them is search update and like status and participation, we should make sure that we have clarity and plan and that everyone's in place to stand in for the remaining 6 weeks or 8 weeks of that search process. I don't know exactly what the details will be, but yeah, just so you said you should have adequate warning. And since that conversation hasn't happened, I won't want you to sign up for it and realize like, oh no, so just something to think about.
Okay, I think we've covered these. I don't know that we
You can
need,
put Alt Watson down there if you want, if
Okay.
you want to finish typing. And then
let's
I'll,
do that. And then
I'll get the dates. I don't need to get the dates. I can probably get it from their website.
all right, we will, I'm going to make a motion for the collective liaisons and alternates as outlined in what is projected on the screen right now, that we approve them. And do I have a second for that?
Okay, you need a second, so I'll second it.
Okay, I mean, rather than read them individually, I'll say as projected, you know, in the chart that we all see here and as discussed, I would move that we approve the liaisons as outlined here, and I have a second. So I know we still have to approve the parent rep to the DAC. We will come to that in a second, but having reached this, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, the motion carries. I will ask Executive Director Harrison to speak to the parent rep for the DAC.
Yes, thank you, President Serafin. There is a board memo attached as item number 5.5, and it's recommending that that the two parent reps that were appointed last year, Marissa John and Joanne Oshima, want to continue, and the recommendation is that they be approved to continue as the parent reps on the Disciplinary Appeals Council.
Okay, I'm happy to make that motion and would ask for a second. I would love to have, if she's willing, Director Chua, just to speak to just the positive engagement that I believe they've had. I've certainly heard from others. So, so I move that we approve Marissa John as the parent rep with Joanne Oshima as the alternate. Do I have a second for the purpose of discussion?
I'll second.
Okay, if there's any discussion or comment, that'd be great. If not, we will go
I think
to
it's
the vote.
great that we have people in our community who are willing to step up and do this. I still am unclear where we get our representatives from and how broadly we make the opportunity available. And I think that we should continue to explore that, not as a diss to the people who are donating their service and giving true heart time. They've done, you know, good work for our kids and our community, and we should appreciate that. And I have nothing against them, and I would gladly vote to approve them. I just want us to keep thinking about how to make this more broadly accessible to our community so that we continue to bring more perspectives into the work.
Thank you. Okay, this time we'll take a vote. All those in favor of continuing Marissa John and Joanne Oshima, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. So I think at this time we are definitely running late, but congratulations on that. We move to the approval of the award for the contract for Sammamish food classroom renovation, and we're going to hear from Mr. McLeod. That is item 6.1.
Yeah, good evening. Yes, I'm seeking approval for the award of construction contract for the Sammamish food classroom renovation project. And we are recommending, after opening bids on November 16th, that the lowest responsive of 4 bidders was Regency Northwest Construction with a bid of $789,000. And so at this point, we would like to seek the award of contract for the Sammamish food classroom renovation project, and it be awarded to Regency Northwest Construction in the amount of $789,000.
Okay, I so move. Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion, any questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the award of contract for the Sammamish food classroom renovation as outlined in the attachments, please say aye. aye, or raise your hand. Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jack McLeod. Sorry, accidentally muted. If we go to item 6.2, if I could ask Hannah or Jess to please project the legislative priority worksheet that was prepared. I'll turn
Actually,
it over
could we please prepare, could we please first project the info sheet?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. There's two attachments. So I just want to make people aware of what's in there. I don't know to what extent you've had an opportunity to consume it, but many thanks to John Harrison and Melissa DeVita for their work and their team's work to support this. And we are working with two lobbyists as well to get this done. So Issaquah School District came up with a way of sort of telling the story of what's happening post-COVID. And they put together a sheet that kind of looks like this to help us talk to it, because there's so many different ways. I think one of the things that you might have heard too often is, you know, well, we're spending ESSER dollars on this. Oh, we didn't get enough ESSER dollars to cover our costs. Oh, but we're spending ESSER dollars on this. And that's very confusing. And the reason that it happens like that is that ESSER dollars have to be spent on particular places in the budget. And so the ESSER dollars are relief funds that were given to us by the federal government and passed through to us through the state to help us defray some of our COVID expenses. And our district, because we don't have a high percentage of poverty, even though we have a high number of students in poverty, got kind of shortchanged on that end of things. And so just this helps us to just sort of see the whole picture and really understand things like the ESSER fund impact, the enrollment impact. Our enrollment, as you know, and you've heard many reports, was going up, and COVID really like made it change, and it's not going to bounce back. It's changed a lot of things, and so this is where we're at. You can see that. You can see what an impact special education funding has. And you can also see how the current prototypical funding model for schools, even with the enhancements to last year's state budget, that's not the legislative info sheet. That's the legislative priorities.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a snafu while you were speaking. The wrong stuff got projected, and so they're trying to get the right stuff up. So thank you.
You know, you'll have to just look at the legislative info sheet yourself, I guess. But the other piece that I really want people to see on it that's absolutely essential to understand is how shortchanged we are in terms of the social emotional supports. So you can see, I'm just going to walk you through what you see right now. The upper left is that chart I mentioned about the decline in enrollment. The right side, you see the blue, like our additional expenditures from COVID and what we got from ESSER funds. Scrolling down quickly, you get the special education shortfall, which is an enormous percent of our levy. It's nearly half of our levy dollars, which are supposed to be spent on enhanced projects, pilots, and other innovations, because it's not supposed to cover basic education, but because of loopholes in the state law that were left there so that the state didn't have to cover its fair share, and the federal government didn't either, we're left spending half of our levy dollars just to fund compliance level special education and you know, to cover the costs of all the special education services we offer. And then if you scroll down even further, the table, this is where I wanted to really draw your attention because we haven't had many conversations about it. The way the state funds nurses, social workers, psychologists, and counselors to support the social emotional needs of our students, which have been growing over time, is clearly not even close to what we need. This is what we're budgeting. We budget, and even with what we budget for, folks are saying we need more resources. So I just wanted you to see this before we talked about what our priorities are, so that you understood like what was driving it and why we care so much.
Thank you, Director Chu. I wondered if you could just maybe hyper focus a little bit on in what way did, I think you basically touched on this, but in what way did the pandemic exacerbate the challenges on the funding for this? for special education in particular?
Well, I think actually, to be quite honest, that the COVID, the pandemic increased the needs of our kids, and it also didn't just increase them, it exposed many of the unmet needs of our students. But COVID actually did a nice thing in the budget last year where there was an ad for additional counselors, but the number of counselors it added to the budget didn't even come close to what we actually spend on for counselors in our district. And folks are still wondering if we have sufficient resources in place to cover the needs of our students. We heard from students at the one of our recent school visits that they just don't get the time with their counselor to develop the relationship they need academically for the college work or socially for the support work. And that's not the fault of the counselors. And they didn't try to imply that it was. They said that, do you know how many people are going to see these counselors? Do you know how much time they're able to give each of us? So we did get a small increase in funding, but it wasn't to the prototypical funding model. And that means that we don't have the freedom to figure out where we want to allocate those resources. It means that we're stuck, if they say you get funding for a nurse, then you get the nurse and you can't turn that into a psychologist or a counselor or whatever. But since we're shortchanged on all of these fronts, it hasn't really mattered yet. But the model that they're taking of being overly prescriptive doesn't bode well. So in the legislature, we really want the prototypical model, and this is going to take a couple of years, of how they fund and allocate money to education to reflect the real social emotional needs of the students we support. And this just shows you how far off it currently is. So in answer to your question, COVID actually helped a small amount, the funding. It didn't hurt it. It just didn't help it in the right direction, and it didn't help it nearly enough. So that's the deal. And then if you look, Melissa and John worked with Jane and me and our lobbyists and put together what are the main things. This is if we could switch to the priorities now. What are the priorities that we want to hold? And we're not looking to say that this is our final cut of the words we're going to use, et cetera, but we want to get your approval tonight that these are the priority areas. We may rework the wording on this. We may change how we present it to legislatures so it's more contextually relevant to the legislative bills that they're working on. But these are the topics. So we want full funding for special education and the student well-being we just talked about. We want adequate funding for all the social emotional supports, but besides the staffing, we want to make sure that our programming in those areas and our professional development and so forth is covered. Response management, which is primarily making sure that the levy, like we have a levy that has a lid, and we're also, every single time there's a distribution of funds, we're getting shortchanged because we're thought of as a rich district. But we're not allowed to tap into that wealth of our community because we're, everything's supposed to come from the state for basic ed. It's just kind of preposterous that we're putting ceilings on what we can spend on our kids and the state isn't fully funding. When you see the shortfall that we have on special education and that we are covering via our local levy, the idea of putting a ceiling on our levies and not applying a regionalization factor to that levy is just offensive. And then equity. We know that students who are receiving language services, who are in poverty and need additional supports, we know that all of these things take additional resources, and we know we have many students in high need, and equity needs to be funded. Like, it's not a simple thing, and the current model just doesn't fund it. So we're asking them to ensure that that happens, and that it happens in a way that truly addresses the sheer number of students, not just a percentage. That's what we've got. Yep.
This is a great overview. I wanted to just build on something just to allow you to speak to it on the, I want to just understand on the access and relevance for all, when you say we're asking for state and federal government to fully fund special ed, in that instance and in student well-being, we're basically saying, basically fully fund your mandate, right? Like you should fully fund basic education. You have a mandate which is appropriate as to special ed, fully fund it. On the fact that we have a different levy cap and we are often at a disadvantage, such as with Seattle, is that where does that show up in the legislative priorities? And do you see any possibility of traction there with the levy lid? Because you mentioned it. I was just wanted to make sure I was tracking this
So
as
there
well.
are two pieces with the levy lid and the regionalization. So first, the special education, the answer to your question is yes, that should be funded as basic ed. There's a loophole that allows districts to go ahead and apply levy dollars to what should be considered basic education. We want that closed, but we don't want it closed until the state actually ponies up the dollars, because we can't afford to have our kids not served. And then we want to make sure that they do the dollars. There are a lot of complexities to that. The OSPI, the state superintendent, has a proposal where he's suggesting that they increase the multiplier that's applied to how much funds are allocated on average for each student receiving special education services, and that there not be a maximum of number of students who can receive special education services. Right now, the state maxes that out at like 13 something percent. And so if you had more than that, that's not been an issue for us. We're right around there, a little bit below. But the issue is the way the state superintendent wants to fund that is interesting, and it takes away from our regionalization, our regionalization factor, which means the higher cost of living, and it would then, there's nothing there to help us with the levy lid. So there are a bunch of districts that are working on some on the levy lid and some on the regionalization factor, but those are the two other factors. They show up here in the black box, I think. Can barely read this on my screen, sorry. Yeah, I think we're asking for regionalization to be provided for the levy lid, but I think there's also going to be an ask to press for upping the lids so that like Seattle doesn't get a higher levy lid than everybody else. So that's happening. And then we don't want them to do away with regionalization. We want them to keep it fair. We don't want it to be so that like we have 300% regionalization and the district next to us has 10%, because that's not fair in attracting teachers and so forth. Thank you for that. So Seema, I think this gray black box is the one that does some of it. And it's not perfectly spelled out here, but those are the two things that are folded in. Jane, am I missing something?
She was shaking her head no, so
no, you're doing good.
All right. Carolyn had a question too, I think.
I have a comment, and it's back on the other page, but as you may know about me, I love when people make data usable and understandable. And so I feel like this sheet on the legislative info sheet, I could use this with anyone. So I really want to thank you for that. But I do have two minor tweak ideas for being able to use it outside of people who know what we're talking about. If we just spelled out what PSES is, enhanced funding, so I think that's Puget Sound Educational something. And then I also wondered about adding a column that might make this more like really powerful for people who don't know, which is the ratio of that this funds students for nurses and students for, because people are shocked when they find out it's like one counselor for 350 students and one nurse for like 1,000 students or whatever it currently is.
That's a great idea.
If you just want to use it and really shock people, which I kind of want to.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We can do that. Carolyn, I want to give credit where credit is due. Issaquah developed this. I think it was Harlan Gallinger's baby. And Melissa really came through with populating it. So I take the credit of making it happen, but I'm not taking the credit of.
Well, you recognized it for that it was. I love these one-page things that are just so powerful. So thank you.
Yeah, I did want to just say on that topic of the ratio, I thought our levy materials, some of that did that pretty well. And so that could be a place where you pull to. That did land the message for a lot of people of, and they seem to seize because they could relate to it, particularly the nurses, and how we used our levies to be able to bridge the gap between our funding and our actual needs, which are still not met. Anyway.
So anyway, we'd like to ask you guys to approve this. And with the caveat that what we're asking you to approve is that these are the sentiments. We ask you to approve the priorities themselves and to approve us to develop additional materials that may present this in different ways. And I just want to establish, to be very clear and transparent that we may come out with other pieces, and we just couldn't do it all for tonight. And I didn't want anyone to feel like, oh, I approved that sheet and now this other thing is going around. This is the sentiment. If we see something in a different piece of material that we develop that expresses some sentiment that's just counter to this, we would bring it back to you for a different approval. But we'd like your permission to approve this and materials that support its communication.
Okay, so I'll take that as a motion.
That is.
From Director Chu, and I will second it.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries.
And I just want to also note that I signed up this year. I've tried to do it in the past, but just haven't been able to do it, to go to the Federal Relations Network, which is a conference that happens. It's a double conference. It's an equity block, and then there's a advocacy institute for 3 days where they do workshops for a day and a half, and then you meet with your federal legislators. And also, if you go with WASDA, not just on your own, I'll be signed up for a lot of the meetings that have to do with special education. So I might meet with the Department of Education to go and do some lobbying, like other people who are lobbying for free school lunches, which we support, but I'm not taking on everything myself. So other people will go to meetings, with the Department of Agriculture, and it's a shared thing. And we're hoping that maybe we can get 2 people there maybe in the future, next year or whatever. But I've registered to go this year, and I checked a few months ago and I was told there was budget. So it is an expensive conference because you're flying to the East Coast and then you have East Coast rates on things. But I do think it's not huge. It's not going to take away major student services or anything like that. So I will do advocacy at the federal level as well, because at the federal level, we're talking about only 16 to 18% of some of the requirements pushed by IDEA legislation for our students with disabilities are covered by the federal funds. And in reality, they're supposed to be covering, they had committed to cover 40%. So last year there was a plan for them to do that, and then it didn't pass. It's going to be pretty rough to get something passed this year with the way that the politics are in the state, in the federal legislature. But we think we can get some traction, and we're going to do what we can.
That sounds
So,
great. When is the conference in DC?
January 27th through February 1.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Is there anything else that either of you had on this topic?
Jane, you have a couple things you were going to bring up, weren't you? Really quick, I think.
Well, we had discussed, I think, regarding with the policy and the well-being policy and working. Are you talking about the article?
Yeah, the article and some of the opportunities to do more local collaboration.
Yeah, so I had mentioned before about working together with our city council to work in collaboration, as because some of the things that we do is it's also in their ballpark as well. We during this whole process of looking at our priorities, had reached out to the city council members and seeing if they have one, or if to see if there's any overlap, and see if we could advocate together in that specific space. And so, but I know that in the past I had said, it would be great if we could meet together to see if there's work we could do together. And surely enough, there was an evidence of other school districts doing similar things. Like I think there was an article Christine has shared with me, was it yesterday or the day before, where their council have earmarked $4 million towards the Seattle School District for social emotional mental health. And so that is their pledge to give towards the district so they can have that additional fund to support the students. And so, and I think that's something that, I mean, obviously that they've come to a conclusion on, but I think that's a great evidence of how we can work together. And because, you know, our kids is not just our kids, it's our kids as a whole community. So.
And I think a lot of times we hear like, why should we collaborate with the city, or the city saying, yeah, we see your priorities for the ledge session, but you know, those are school priorities. They're not our priorities. And I think that we're missing opportunities to understand the overlap of where we serve the well-being of our kids. And so, you know, Seattle schools, the Seattle council putting a budget together where they are barely passing their budget. They may be in a deficit, but they still managed to scrabble up $4 million, over $4 million to put towards counselors for kids in schools. That's a pretty powerful statement about we're in it together. And I think we need to have more of those conversations. So because Jane's been looking at that and talking to folks, like she shared some of our ideas for the legislative priorities, letting them know that they weren't passed yet. But when the city was working on its priorities, she was talking to Lynn Robinson and talking to the other folks there. And I think that there might be something at some point we'd like to bring the whole board to, not just an initial conversation, but maybe explore if there are something deeper things we can do.
That's great. That's a great update. Can I ask a question about this, where the city piece comes in funding? It just feels like when Bellevue develops more avenues for resource, it feels like often we get penalized in some other way. So does that happen? Like if for Seattle, for example, if the city council earmarks something for them, they don't end up. I would like to believe that then at the legislative level, nobody says, well, I count that in. And so now I dial down your, whatever it is, the exception you got on your levy lid. I'm just wondering.
You know, they don't for Seattle, they don't tend to count it against them because number one, they have a great lobbying situation. And number two, they have a higher degree of poverty and a higher degree of need on an average, like percentage wise basis, and even numbers, right? It's a huge city. We do take some hits for those things. We can't guarantee that we wouldn't, but I think overall we've already taken that hit. I think we already have your Bellevue. And there are some things that we have to explore. I'm going to make something very transparent for all of you that we haven't discussed deeply, but at some point we'll have a deeper discussion. And that is when I collected data from the 20 counties in this region, and I look at the overspend that we do on for students with receiving special education services, we are somewhere around $5,000 a student more than everyone else. And we're looking at that and trying to understand that, because it's fine to say, you know, you might be that much more than someone in an area that maybe they have lower cost of living, less intersectionality, whatever. But we're talking about with comparable districts and stuff, and we are the highest. I think we might be the highest in the state. And so I think there are opportunities for us to think about things differently so that maybe we can put our funds to the most efficient use possible. I mean, I'm sure we're trying, like, I don't think we're throwing any money away, but I think that like there are choices that we can make that might help. And I think that will, like, as we look at those things, I think it can help mitigate some of the shifts, because I know, you know, that we fielded questions from Lisa Wellman, Senator Wellman, saying, why are you guys spending so much? And we hadn't dug into it. So we're starting to dig into that and understand it. And Melissa is doing a phenomenal job, and she's working with the whole special education team to understand it. Like, why is it that we have some of these higher needs? Because there is a selection preference. Like, people do with some people with higher needs do choose our district. So on average, we sometimes end up with students with even higher needs than other districts because because people are selecting us. There are all sorts of reasons. It's not just about whether or not we use our funds perfectly. So she's digging into that with the team. And but if you're going to talk about reputation, when we address things like that, it will mitigate. So a lot of these factors come together. I know that wasn't exactly what you asked, but I think it all ties together.
That is actually, that was pretty much exactly what I was asking. So thank you. If there's nothing more here, I just want to thank you. Just pause one more time to see if there's any questions for other board members. So if not, I think, thank you for that. I think we'll move to director discussion. We are running a little behind, but not terribly behind. I do want to keep our director discussion, then we'll take a short break before we go to our study session, which we've limited to 30 minutes, and we can maybe shorten a little bit more than that too. Okay, so yes, Director Chu.
So I let you know that I had an item to add to
Yes,
discussion, and you suggested that I ask if I could start it. I don't
Super
usually
simple.
ask to start it, especially since I have other work items and take up a lot of voice time, but I'm gonna ask
No,
tonight to do so.
it's great. So for context, Director Chu mentioned last night a collaboration between her and Director Aris on a policy, I believe around social emotional health and well-being. And we agreed it wasn't a board business item just yet, but it was worthy of discussion. And I said, since our time's limited on director discussion, how about if you raise your hand so you guys can start it? So go ahead.
All right, so here's the scoop. You know, we've been having a lot of discussions about policies to bring forth and where to get them going. And you had mentioned that one of the reasons that you put together a policy draft on the ecological piece is that you felt like that would help it have some legs and be more tangible. And I think we feel the same way. And I think that also in looking at our commitment to our kids, we're coming out of a pandemic. We haven't fully come back. You know, kids have come back, and there are kids who are thriving, and they were thriving more in the pandemic than they are now. So that transition is important to them. Some were thriving less in the pandemic and haven't fully recovered. Same with our staff, same with even some of our functionalities, right? There are things that broke, and having relationships restored takes time, and supporting kids to do that takes time. But in addition to that, there's just a large need. We talk a lot about intervention services, both academically and social emotionally. And we don't talk as much, although I think sometimes they do, maybe just not at the school board level, about tier 1 services, about the core services that we give to our kids every day that help prevent, manage, and empower our students to be able to take care of themselves. We also wonder for the special education optimization to make that program stronger and better and to meet those needs. There's so much intersectionality. And when we talked to, well, they grew their work through Bellevue, but they are now state and federal level advocates for special education. And we talked to Jennifer Carls and Sarah Butcher, and we discussed a lot and said, you know, what do we need to do to help students receiving special education get what they need? What do we need funding wise as we're going after this? Are there additional things? And they said, you gotta stop thinking of these kids as special education kids. They're kids. And if we had the appropriate services for all kids, it might actually reduce the percentage of kids who are referred to special education services. It might also help with just taking care of our kids, etc. So as you know, we've always talked about how do we take care of our kids, but how do we do it at a core level? And so we mentioned, I think Jane and I both mentioned this policy, the idea for a social emotional policy, and I think others might have voiced some support for that. When we did that, we thought, well, you know, we'll just get it on the docket. But it's at such a fundamental level that I thought this is more than something we should get done at some point in time. This is a fundamental piece of how we think about our children and how we serve them. And so I went to WASDA and I was like, hey, you guys didn't have a model policy. Well, guess what? In 2021, they did come up with a model policy, but they called it social emotional climate. And Hannah if it's possible, or do you be able to project the markup Word document I gave you? I think it's called Student Wellbeing Policy Draft. So what we did is we took the document from WASDA and we went ahead and did a small markup on it. And we don't think this is the be all end all policy. This isn't intended to be a first reading. It's intended to introduce the concept and get some feedback from board members so that we could give it back to staff and say, what do you think? But the policy is to kind of define the commitment we're making. And the way this was done is to then define a set of procedures that the staff will do about how we will ensure this is happening, how we'll monitor it, how we'll empower people, how we'll get, and it also talks about how we'll bring stakeholders in. So I sat down with Jane and we made a few changes to this policy. And the reason we made them is because we felt like the policy as written, WASDA sometimes makes the error of not focusing on the student. They don't mean to, because the old idea is this affects the student, but we want this policy of all policies to be completely student focused. So it's not about climate, it's about students. So we would propose that when we think about this and when we start working on this policy, we also took into heart the idea that we as a district try to use model policies as written unless there's a substantive reason to make a change, so that it's easier to maintain them legally and over time. So we did believe there were some substantive reasons for change. So we changed it to a student well-being policy, not a climate policy. And we wanted to say that this is more than just a commitment to education, but it's also a commitment to well-being and sense of belonging. And not for all students overall, but for each and every student. So we made a change there to get the start of this going. We also, and also the other thing is we used as a data source, one of our primary data sources was the whole collection of conversations we had with the community last spring in preparation for the superintendent search. Because one of the things that we were all struck by, at least I was extremely struck by, and I heard others make comments, was, yeah, people expect rigorous academics or this or that, but the one thing that everyone asked for was to like take care of my child, grow my child, look at my child as a person, treat my child as a person, help my child treat others as real people. So that input came in here. So we added the word inclusive because we believe that inclusive is actually important to define and to state. In the next paragraph, again, we repeated that this isn't just about a continuous improvement process. It's actually about student well-being, sense of belonging, and these other things that impact it. But it's about students and how this experience is for them. And then the other thing that we did is rather than make the policy stand still in time and say, oh yeah, use this procedure that was developed by someone in some committee from the state. We basically said, use that and the best practices. And it's kind of an ironic thing because the previous paragraph on this starts out with the board recognizes there is not one best way to improve school climate. And then it provides these 4 procedures that they've already written and tells us to implement them. So it's kind of ridiculous. So we said we don't just want to implement the procedure, we want to develop and implement accompanying procedures that we're going to define to provide a framework that not just is a climate improvement process, but to proactively attend to student well-being and belonging through an ongoing climate assessment process, and that it should be aligned with research best practices and so forth. And then the last sentence we thought was just like background foof, and so we removed it. It wasn't policy, it was just rationale. So we'd like to propose this as a starting point for us to make a bigger commitment. I've provided the 4 procedures that were the 4 model procedures and this document and the WASDA, whatever they call that, legislative and policy news write-up about this policy to John. And we'd like to use this as a starting point. And in order to do, we can still, put it into John's list, prioritize it with the rest. But in my view, it would be really awesome if we would actually be able to have such procedures written up and in place before next year starts, so that as we do our planning, this is fundamental to it. And I thought, Jane and I talked and thought, you know what, let's get it to the board sooner than later. Let's get a little feedback and see what they say. So here you go.
And I just want to add 2 cents here. I think even today, as we had public comments, the ask of the support in the social, emotional, and mental health space, the behavioral support is huge. I think it's coming from the students, it's coming from staff, it's coming from the community at large. And so I think the ask has been pretty consistent and persistent, I think all last year and still up to today. So I do think it is something that we should prioritize. Where in the list of our long priorities of policies that we would like to tackle, it's hard to say, but it is, I think we do need to make a deeper commitment and sooner than later.
Well, I just want to say thank you for doing this. I think you might be on mute. I don't know if Director Chu, you were trying to say something, but
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say thank you for doing this. I think it's not down for a vote, so I just want to be mindful. But I think this is great work. I think a lot of the changes you made really speak to the values of the community. Sounds like John knows that this is heading his way, and it just seems, so I won't speak for others, but it just seems like something that will be put in the hopper and but appropriately prioritized for I think you're going to be coming back very early in the year, John, to show us your proposal. But so
Steve, I did want to speak to one other piece on this, and that is we did a verbal critical criteria discussion. We did not do the full table. We have it set up to do, but the view that we really took on was that the community participation that informed us pressing this forward has already happened. And what we really need is for that process that they're talking about, the framework, that's the place where you would need to have deep community engagement. So what you would see is a really deep critical criteria. We still need a critical criteria review for this to be formalized, but the deep participation proactively would be in developing and finalizing those frameworks that come out of this, because that's where folks would get to speak to participate in it and to be part of the ongoing work. So we think that there's an opportunity for a really deep look. And again, we're happy to document the critical criteria pieces that we felt were done, but so there's a start. It is not an afterthought. It was kind of motivated by community participation. Just wanted to get that in there because we didn't provide that today.
I do see John on camera. If you have anything to say, I do want to just be mindful. Maybe we have another 10 minutes of director discussion. I'd like to make sure we give everybody a chance to talk as well. I know I personally probably need a little bit of a break. We allotted 10 minutes, and I promised directors I would be a little better about not skipping our breaks before we go to our study session. So, John, Executive Director Harrison, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, you said it. You summarized nicely. Thank you.
All right. Any other directors want to speak on this or any other topic?
I'll just add 2 cents. I'm really happy that WASA had a draft for us to look at and see, because I know that as I was thinking about how do we help as a board and in creating a policy, having that there was a nice place to start.
No, it's great work that sounds like it gave a good foundation to build from. So it's really good. Vice President Shuey.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll echo what everybody seems to be saying, which is this is really great work and it really reflects the values of our district. So thank you for doing that. I had 2 other items, if I can. Is this director discussion? that
It is, and then so go ahead, and then we'll make sure others get to speak too. I'll go last if we have time. If not, no worries.
Okay, I wanted to amplify and thank all the people who talked today about the concerns that they have about the armed police officers coming back into our schools. And as folks have heard me say at other meetings, but I'll just continue to say it, I am deeply concerned, and I'm glad that we are listening to the voices of people in the community, including significantly, we heard that the Bellevue Education Association has passed a statement on this and their opposition to it, which it should be no surprise I'm also opposed for the reasons I've discussed before. I want to urge us again to reconsider the name of the program, because it is an injury to try to shape it as the CEO program. That our name, as I've said in the past, is we need to start with a base understanding of what it is that we're talking about. And it is disrespectful to try to change it into something else, because then it's really hard to even have the discussion. So I will continue to call it armed police officers. The district is proud of having and recommending armed police officers in the schools. Then let's at least get the facts straight, and that is what we're talking about. Otherwise, if we're talking about bringing mentors and counselors and guardians, educators into the schools, then why do they have to be armed? But what this program is really about our armed people coming into our schools. And we know that when you have armed people, wherever they come from, it just adds a complexity and a danger that doesn't exist if we don't have lethal weapons in the schools. So that is my comment on armed police officers. Really, really grateful to the folks from the community who spoke today, students in particular. I know they have a lot of pressures on them right now, and appreciate taking the time and continue to bring attention to this. Second item that I wanted to raise is something that I've raised before. I would like to project my screen. It relates to critical criteria review, and I mentioned in the past that I've got a suggestion about it, and similar to what Directors Aris and Chu brought up, it's just sort of a proposed food for thought. I've mentioned conceptually what I am thinking about, and at some point, I didn't have anyone to collaborate with on this, would love to when this phase is over, but I will, it's still important to me, and I will project it if I may. So this has to do with the critical criteria review, and my thought that I've mentioned at a couple of past board meetings, that it would be really helpful to in the—
Can you make that bigger?
Yes. How's that? Or larger still? Can you hear me?
It was fine as modified.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So the policy, as we know, is a really important and policy that we're really proud of, which is policy 0130, and the critical criteria documentation, which requires us to take measures to understand what the impact of a new policy or a changed policy would be. I did not perform a critical criteria review on this. I would love some assistance and support even on how to fill out the table. But you can see here that my proposal is to include the identification of the author of the critical criteria review as part of the critical criteria review, because as we know, if the tobacco industry is sponsoring a study on tobacco, that is relevant. If we've got different departments that are sponsoring a policy, it's relevant. And so just would like for us to have a better sense of if we've got all the right and complete voices in a proposed policy. I believe it's really important, and it shouldn't be a lot of burden to add the identification of the authors. And so that would be my proposed change, which I will work with General Counsel or whoever I need to see how to stage it for inclusion on our chart of different policies. how that would cascade through is that in the procedure, also there would be an additional phrase that would also say that the author will be identified. Doesn't need to be in exactly these places, but I wanted to provide a visualization of what I've talked about before. And finally, in the critical criteria review table itself, there would just be an extra row that would say who are the authors, including the title and or team to which the authors belong, so that we have a sense of what it is that we're looking at and what biases, conscious or unconscious, we might be facing. So I just wanted to, as I said, provide, I've talked about it before, but wanted to give the visualization to what I'm thinking about and get feedback or instruction on how to stage it and include it in a discussion among all the different policies that we're talking about.
So I think on that piece, I think on the last piece about how to stage it, get it forward, I think Executive Director Harrison is hearing this. I think that will allow him to know, if you share it with him in the, I won't speak for you, John, but I think in the broader assessment you're making, you have then that advantage of just having heard that discussion now. Before, I know we're still in director discussion, a little way over, but I do want to give a little time, if I may. Thank you, Vice President Shuey. I just want to ask Director Watson, if you want to speak. I know you had mentioned maybe you might give us a little bit of an update from the WASDA conference and some of the things that you attended. I know that you, as well as Directors Aris and Chu, also attended in person in Spokane. I just wondered if maybe you wanted to say a few things.
Well, three of us.
Or maybe that's not what you want to talk about.
Yeah, three of us were there, and so I think I'll just be like super brief. As usual, I went to the law conference, which I always enjoy because they give you a lot of information. But one thing really stuck out, they're talking about what happened in the last Supreme Court session, what's happening in the one that's this year, things that haven't quite been decided yet. And one thing that really stuck out for me was Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, which we think of as a college thing, but they think that is a possibility. The lawyer that was presenting there from the National School Association of School Lawyers, or whatever the group was, said that it could affect K-12 because it could affect the way we are allowed to report our statistics and the way we look at subgroups and the way we look at marginalized students. So I thought we really need to follow along on that one. There's a number of other ones, a lot of these things about using public funds to fund religious schools, which, there's a lot of other information that we could talk about, First Amendment rights, all kinds of things, but it was an all-day conference. The other thing I wanted to say was that in terms of training, there's a session on how school board directors should be supportive of collective bargaining, or how we should think about it and so forth. And I just thought the presenter was extremely adversarial. And so I don't know, without getting into too much detail, but he was just adversarial, and like at one point he said, don't be afraid of a strike because your entire public will back you. And then I went up to him and I said, I don't think that would work in Bellevue. And he's like, yeah, you're right. It wouldn't work in Bellevue. But I'm like, oh, good. So that wasn't great. I did see Hank and went to his session and saw him with other school districts that he worked with. That was kind of fun. And I had, unfortunately, the very last session of the conference, the most scary session on MTSS. I went to it because I thought I was going to learn more about, strategies that other people had used and, just a school board level view of what MTSS was. But what it was a guy who, not a guy, but a guy who works for a school district that I don't necessarily think I should name because I'm going to say negative things. They wrote software. They wrote work software, like click here if you're sad, and that generates an email to your counselor who's going to call your parents, and click this click down list to select your favorite trusted adult in the building to see if they can talk to you. And teachers can press this button and a principal will appear. I mean, it was, I thought, horrible. And I did go up to the guy afterwards and I said, I have real concerns here with data security and whatnot. And he said, oh no, we have to do this because we have an equity policy. So I didn't learn. So I get my point in telling you this is that I guess the WASDA sessions vary in quality. Might be the takeaway, but I did say I'm going to watch out for this and maybe talk to even some other people in our district to kind of make sure we're not going to do something like this. Click your favorite trusted adult. Oh my goodness. Okay. So that's what some things I learned at WASDA. I had quite a bit more, but I'll stop there.
Seema, maybe I think that a lot of the things that I had from WASDA would be applicable for discussion under some of our governance training and work.
Yeah,
I wonder if we might, though, I still wonder though, if we might actually put time on an agenda for us to actually share some of the substantive things that we took away that we think might be applicable to the district that might be worth pursuing on a future agenda.
Okay. All right, so
I agree on that.
if you don't mind, email me just so that I'm clear about what your ask is. But I think what I hear is you're saying in a regular board meeting business agenda versus in a study session. Because what we're going to do next, just briefly, is talk about the governance study session we're going to have on December 15th. We're going to just convene as we agreed on, I think it was November 10th, just convene enough to be able to talk about where are we in our review of those materials and how do we want to use our time on the 15th. So maybe when we talk during study session, we can also think about when and how might the takeaways you're talking about, when and how should we bring them together. I will, in light of just our shortness of time and probably the desire for everybody to take a break, I'll suggest we stand in recess to reconvene in our study session at 7:35. So I'll give us a good 10 minutes. Oh, I see your hand is up, Director Ars. I'm sorry.
I just want to do a quick shout out because I know that several of us were attended this Sammamish BTSA event yesterday regarding social media, and I have to say, student panel that presented and they're being vulnerable and sharing their just inner thoughts and wishes and asks, and they were so fantastic in being vulnerable to and really opening up to all of us to learn from. I so much appreciated. And today our speaker, I was just blown away with her poem, and just want to take a pause and say, we have some amazing students, and just want to put that in there.
And
yeah, that's a great way to end, because I think the student we had speak today, like all of them, but was really inspiring. Oh, sorry, Director Chu.
And one other thing I just want to add is that, Director Shui made some comments about how important it is that we're having her position about the SROs. I also wanted to say that the reason that we're having these additional contacts with our community and really taking those voices into effect is that at least 3 of the board directors had expressed comments for multiple months about concerns with the approach that was being taken, and took action to the extent that it made it clear to the district how important it was, that there was appreciation for trying to remedy a situation that wasn't where it needed to be, and yet there was still a need that hadn't been fulfilled to really understand and coordinate with our community on this. And so I encourage personally, and hope that people will continue to participate into these opportunities the district is providing to have these conversations. And I hope that our students will continue to participate, as well as our families and staff, because this is how we create programs that are truly responsive and equitable and important, is by getting those voices heard and inputted into the planning. And so I just want to thank Director Shui for bringing it to attention, but really encourage our community. Like, we created this, we pressed back and asked for deeper diligence on this so that our community could participate. So I hope that people will continue to take advantage of that and be part of defining this. And I really appreciate your voices. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to jump in there as well. I like that Director Chu said, again, I think there's three of us who have been pushing this pretty hard, but I so much appreciate our students who stepped up and vocalized. And I think they were the trigger point of us saying, okay, let's pause. And as well as our educators, BEA, stepping up and writing a resolution and making a stance on where they feel is, you know, of value. And so, and as well as our community members at large who have vocalized in and making it clear. And I think what I hear constantly is, you know what, let's focus on our student mental health. And I so much appreciate them constantly echoing that.
Here, 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 here. Thank you. I wanted to point out that we have gotten, or I have gotten some feedback that the way we've been asking the questions and allowing people to show up has been, for lack of a better word, I'll just say it directly, it's been defective, honestly, because the survey that's gone out, I've heard from multiple people, presumes that you want SROs, armed police officers, in the schools. And okay, if they're there, or assuming that they are going to be there, then, you know, what can we do? But as I've said before, it's sort of lipstick on a fish, you know, it's just, we need to give the community a true opportunity to express how they feel. And one of the ways that they may well feel, and I have heard that they do, and as we've said tonight, at least three of us have said this, is deeply troubled by bringing, you know, lethal weapons into the schools at all, along with all of the, you know, the complexities, as Mr. Roble said earlier, of the relationship between, especially between marginalized students and law enforcement. In addition to the survey, from what I've heard, not being responsive to allowing for that diversity of reaction to armed police officers, I have also heard that that all of the sessions have been only in person, and so we have not provided an opportunity, from what I have been told, and I did a little bit of double checking, and it does appear that what I've heard is right, that we don't have an opportunity, a mechanism for people to provide input in an online venue, and then if they are directed to use the survey, they can't say that they oppose the armed police officers. So I ask staff who are listening to, you know, to consider that as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to suggest, thank you, everyone. I am going to suggest we are now in recess until 7:40. We will resume and at that time and do our study session, which may be abbreviated to 20 minutes. So we will pick up at that time. Thank you.
Do we use the same link, or do we go to another link? Oh, maybe we stay on this one.
We stay on this one.
Okay.
And yeah, and you can connect with Hannah if you need to, but I think we're good on that.
Okay, great. Thank you.